seconds. A good time, guys. Stay with us. We got 100 people.
some people from all different walks, different viewpoints, different ideas. It's going to be a really fun episode. Let me just introduce everybody. My name is Jeff. You want to introduce yourself?
My name is Stitch, also known as Jeff. Student to the game, love learning, love blockchain, anything. Love being here with you guys.
Love it. We love to have you, big dog, part of the home team. I got Quai Networks, Dr. K in the house. Dr. K, tell us about Quai. Tell us about what you do.
Yeah, so I'm CTO at Dominant Strategies, the development company for Quai. Quai is a scalable proof of work blockchain system that's EVM compatible. We kind of use a hierarchy merge mine chains to do 50,000 TPS, EVM compatible, and a couple other cool tricks up our sleeves. But yeah.
Who are you?
What's up, Maddie? I am Craig Shapiro, Naples local finance guy, Bitcoiner, macro strategist for a firm called the Bear Traps Report. Becoming increasingly apparently a shit poster on Twitter.
I love it. I love it.
Some of the Trump policies which are not going according to plan. So maybe we'll get into that.
Everyone's like, people are telling me, why do you have that anti-Trump guy on your fucking podcast? And I said, because we believe in fucking freedom and we want to hear different viewpoints. That's why. I love it. I love the debate. I like to hear all sides of the equation. Let's hear different ideas. I think that's important for intellectual growth and thought. I might disagree and I might have a different opinion, but that's okay. Let's unpack it all and then you can make your own judgment. Today we have two giveaways. We are giving away a courtesy of Bitcoin Ben's Crypto Club, a ticket that I think they're going for like $700 now, something crazy, to the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas. So whoever listens and asks the best question, about, whatever, right? Whatever we're talking about, whoever has a comment, I think, Paul, I don't know if you got the live chat thing integrated with Rumble and with YouTube and with all these different platforms, but whoever asked the best live chat question or comments on our thread, comments on the show link on X, we will review all takers and we're going to give away a ticket courtesy of Bitcoin Ben's Crypto Club to Bitcoin Day Las Vegas, and we're going to give away a ticket to Bitcoin Day Tampa, which is just kind of like a one-day event, fun Bitcoin. They feed you. You get to meet, people in the Bitcoin community. You get to talk about. It's very like a much more intimate event. But we're going to give away two tickets. So if you are in the Tampa area and you want that ticket, comment, and we're going to take two of the best questions, best comments, and give those tickets away. So, with that being said, welcome to the pod, guys. A lot of stuff happening. Paul, do you want to pull up our first story of the day and we can kind of unpack here? So much happening.
As he's pulling that up,
yeah.
I would just like to mention when we're talking about Trump, has anybody ever noticed that when Trump got elected, the majority of his like forward-facing like people, all Democrats?
That is kind of wild. It's
Trump, Democrat.
Yeah, former Democrat.
Elon, Democrat.
Former Democrat, yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard,
yeah,
former Democrat.
She was the chair of the DNC,
RFK,
I think, at some point.
Right?
Yeah.
Former Democrat. So it's like the Democrats like went off the deep end, and then like the rational ones like got together, became Republicans, and like formed the Trump administration.
It sure as hell seems that way. I think the Trump administration is it's the broad tent. It's the more broad tent party, at least right now. That's what it feels like, right? And some of the. I think I saw like Democrat approval rating right now is like 19% or 21%. It's like something like just astronomically low. And Trump is like, I've said this multiple times. Trump's like the master at like, he's willing to change his mind on things. And like if he'll talk to somebody, they can like, if they can make a rational argument to him, he'll change his mind. Like, and he's gotten on the side of all these like 80-20 issues where he's just like taking the 80% side. And like the other, like you're seeing this right now, like even with like the pharmacy stuff that's happening. I mean, I don't know all the deep specifics of it, but like you've got people coming out and just being like, no, Trump said this, so like I'm taking the other side of this. Like we can't do this now. So all these like 80-20 issues, it seems like Trump's just like getting on the side of the 80, and he's like making the Democrats essentially like take the other side to like oppose him. So like Elizabeth Warren and like they've got these choreographed message that comes out from AOC, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders. Like every time it's like the same message, and they just like put it out. It's like whatever Trump said, it's the opposite. Yeah, it's kind of funny to see.
I mean, I'd say that wing is more like it's more a populist wing than a traditional Republican wing. It's just that populist wing has no place in the Democratic Party, unfortunately, for the Democrats. And so I think you have these traditional Democrats or traditional populists who found themselves in the Democratic Party are like, I can't do that anymore. And so they're like, well, where do I have a voice?
Yeah.
Trump's a populist, right? I mean, Trump's a Democrat by heart, but he's a populist. And so these people have, they found voice, with him in a lot of these issues, right? And a lot of these, and I think a lot of it also is just grounded in search for truth, right? I know it sounds a little bit, he doesn't sound always like the best messenger for searching for the truth, just kind of given his past and some of his transgressions. But he has been for breaking down the deep state. He has been for, finding truth in a variety of things, whether it's the JFK tapes or other things, and things that we're all, and there's a list of things that we're waiting for, right? And we could talk about that too, about why haven't we received a lot of the information that we said we were going to be receiving. But I think that search for truth is common in those folks who are following him. And I think it's also common in this independent media podcast community, right? Joe Rogan and Dave Smith and the like of, folks who are in Tucker and people who are searching for truth on both sides of the spectrum are, found themselves, following him as opposed to the other side, which is unbelievably restricting in that search for truth, which is wild.
There's only one question I want to know the answer to. Is Craig Shapiro on the Epstein client list?
Oh no.
That is a definitive
Is this why it hasn't come out yet?
That is a definitive no.
That's the deep question. That's the deep question. So, Paul, why don't you pull up our first take of the day? You have it up there at the top. Let's see. Okay. So we've got this whole issue of, it seems like, the news cycle just can't even keep up with everything that the Trump administration is doing. But I guess over the weekend we have already, it looks like a preliminary deal on the China-U.S. situation. So Chinese tariffs on the U.S. are now 10% lower than they were under Biden. U.S. tariffs on China are now 30% higher than they were under Biden. The tariffs now favor the U.S. more. This wouldn't have happened by asking nicely. Calling this a loss is pure partisanship. I think Craig might take the other side of that. Let's maybe not. Maybe he somewhat agrees. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Craig?
So what I would say is the Trump administration had an aggressive idea behind implementing a trade and tariff regime. We've talked about that on the show quite some time. I've been pretty active talking about how I actually believe that tariffs were the right policy prescription for what the Trump administration was trying to do regarding resetting the global trading order, bringing back manufacturing jobs to America, bringing back investment to America, and that tariffs were a tool to help get us there. It would also help fund government deficits with additional revenues. And so there were a lot of good reasons for the tariff strategy. I thought the rollout of, what was it called, Liberation Day, was pretty poor. And the markets didn't like it, clearly. And so we spent the first couple weeks of April kind of dealing with this potential sudden stop in the economy from a massive increase in tariffs that China retaliated in a big way, and we retaliated again. And they said, you know what, you guys are idiots. We're not even going to retaliate even further because this is absurd. And there's a trade embargo basically between the two countries.
Yeah.
Markets didn't like it. Stocks got killed. Bonds started to sell off, which I think really spooked the administration. Dollar sells off, and enough folks call up Bessent, call up Trump, call up Lutnick, enough wealthy people, and say, guys, we got to, can we tone this down a little bit? And they do. And they decide to do a 90-day delay on every country except for China, right? And so they keep on the reciprocal tariffs with China. They delay on everybody else, but they keep on 10% for everybody else. Markets feel a little bit better. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, that rally has, been accelerated by, we're eventually going to make a deal with China. We're going to talk, we're going to make a deal. And this past weekend culminated with finally a sit down between Secretary Bessent and the Chinese counterparty in Geneva. And the expectation going in was that they would come to some sort of agreement to ratchet down the retaliation and the reciprocal tariffs, but they would be largely kept on because China is the biggest issue for America with respect to the trade deficits. Trump had said on Friday, maybe we'll go to 80% down to 145%. And lo and behold, we come out on Sunday afternoon and all the reciprocal tariffs are gone, except for the 10%. And then China kept their 10% on us. So it looks to me like the administration pushed hard to try to force China out of the global trading regime. And China said, bring it. And then America, the leadership was like, maybe we don't like this because we have an issue. Container shipments are dropping 50%, 60% year on year. Our markets don't like it. Our small businesses don't like it. Retail doesn't like it. Nobody seems to like it. And it's happening too fast. So let's bring it back down. And China says the only way we're going to negotiate is if you take it all the way back to where it was on April 1st. And that's where we are. We're basically back to April 1st. We're basically
Which was what percent?
We're basically back to whatever it was that existed plus 10%. So China had,
I think 30% is where we're at right now.
Because that's what it's saying. So the 20% is fentanyl, and 10% is this additional 10. And then prior to that, we also, from the Biden administration, we were at 20. So we're kind of in the 50% camp. Now, China had already put tariffs on America during the Biden administration, has kept those on. When the U.S. put fentanyl tariffs on us before April 2nd, they did other things. They've kept that on too. And so we put 10 on them, they put 10 on us. So that statement is actually is wrong. That tweet is wrong.
So you're saying that this tweet is wrong.
I'm saying that guy's tweet is incorrect.
Grok it. Let's see what Grok has to say. I mean, AI isn't everything, but
China didn't put an additional 20 on America to match the 20 fentanyl. But they put other things on us in certain products, and those have been kept on. So
ask it if this is accurate. If the 10 and 30 numbers are,
just ask. Chinese tariffs. It says China tariffs on the U.S. are now 10% lower than they were during Biden. That's actually not true.
It says that, noting that Chinese tariffs on U.S. goods dropped to 10%.
So the 125 was what China had added to retaliate against the 145. So now they're just kind of stayed at 10. But they had, prior to this whole thing, they have tariffs on us just like we have tariffs on them.
Correct.
So,
but they've historically had tariffs on us higher than what we've had on them. Like, is that accurate?
It is accurate. That is accurate, and
that doesn't seem fair to me. I mean, especially with how much we buy of their stuff. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, look, the point is I think we had a very legitimate case for what we were doing. And I thought that we should be more aggressive. Now, 145 probably wasn't the right strategy.
I mean, of course, that's classic art of the deal. If you look at Trump, if you read Trump's that's like just classic, like how he operates, like an obscene ask and then bring it down to reality. But you kind of set that tone that, hey, we're willing to fucking take this thing to the limit. It's kind of like gives you more credibility when you actually get to the negotiating table. You can be like, I'm crazy, motherfucker. Look what I just did. Yeah, and I was willing to fucking burn it all down to get what I want. Like, I'm not fucking around.
Yeah, but my point is, like, China said, bring it, and then we basically said, and that they won't talk to us until we bring it back down to 10.
That's
what we did.
They came and talked to us pretty fucking quick, and then they had a deal pretty quickly. So I think both sides of the equation, there was some serious pain being felt from both sides. I'm not buying into the narrative that China was not affected by this. I mean, you look at their factory stuff that was going on. There's news articles coming out. They stopped reporting economic data that they normally report. There was a lot of. I think Xi took out a lot of people in his cabinet recently. There was some stuff happening over there that was seriously concerning. The container shipments not going out. I mean, entire factories closing down. There was. I think as much as people don't want to admit it, like, our two countries are connected in a lot of ways. So, like, if we're feeling pain, they're feeling pain. And I think the meeting that they had in Geneva was productive. It basically said, look, we got to rebalance this we have to kind of rebalance this relationship. It's like, you guys need to consume a little bit more. And, like, we can't be in a situation where, like, we can't make medicine an emergency, right? Like, and I think that message I think Basent had that message. I mean, and I think China came, I think I read that they brought their guy who was in the ministry of, the minister of something that deals with the fentanyl. Like, he came to the meeting and said, look, this is a problem. Like, we're going to address this. So I think it was productive. I mean, I feel happy and content with what I've seen so far. So here it does say the conclusion here from his post. It says they are accurate based on the U.S.-China trade deal announced on May 11, 2025. that White House, NPR, and BBC sources confirm that Chinese tariffs on U.S. goods dropped from 125% to 10%, and U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods dropped from 145 to 30%. The comparison to Biden-era tariffs is also correct. 30% is higher than the 19% average U.S. tariff on China under Biden.
My understanding
And
is
10%
all
lower.
All that China did was they took their retaliation tariffs and they just put them back from 125 to 10. So whatever they had before April 2nd stayed in place. They went up by 125, and then they took that off and went up just to be up 10. Which
I think this is bigger than that, Craig. I think go back to what Grok's analysis. It's a
give
20% swing is basically what it's saying here. It's basically saying that under Biden they had an average 21.2% average Chinese tariff on the U.S. goods under Biden. So Trump got 10% for the big guy on one side, and he got 10% for big guy on the other side.
Yeah.
And it's a 20 point swing, and I think that's kind of a big deal.
I still don't think that's accurate.
Well,
You still don't think that? You're still disputing
I'm
that?
disputing
Okay.
that,
guys, I personally think that arguing over this number is missing the point. If you look at what he did, and you can say that it was like ham-handed or whatever, like coming in,
It was for sure ham-handed, but
like on April
that pissed
2nd.
a lot of people off.
I think the genius move here was that he took off the tariffs on everybody but China, because in addition to getting an outcome where we have a more favorable export position in the world, the other thing that you're trying to accomplish here is getting geostrategic diversity in your supply chain away from China. And so by isolating China with high tariffs, it encouraged every other country to come to the table and start trying to negotiate deals as quickly and efficaciously as possible.
I agree with you completely.
And it also forced everybody. Hold on. It also forced everybody that has a supply chain coming out of China to look at what they thought the net outcome of the trade deal would be, which they all thought was diversifying away from China. So even though this was like a temporary thing, and even though if it went back to the thing or it went plus 20 for the US, it doesn't matter, because the supply chain and everybody in the supply chain has already started to diversify away from China because of how he removed the tariffs from everybody else. The other tariffs are going to be much lower than China anyway in any series of outcomes. So then everybody's looking and they're like, well, maybe I shouldn't do all this manufacturing in China. Maybe I need to look to Southeast Asia. Maybe I need to look to India. And they started diversifying away from China, which is helping to accomplish the bigger goal of diversifying the supply chain dependency on China.
Every other country
win.
Every other country has 10% tariffs.
Yeah, but 10% compared to 140% or whatever it was, I would still diversify out of China.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but every country now has the additional 10% tariffs. And China actually has 10% back on us, where no other country has those 10% back on us. So we actually, our biggest adversary, we allowed them to now tariff 10% back to us, where our allies...
Well, we're hitting them for 30, so we're not hitting our allies for 30.
Yes, we are. We're hitting Mexico and Canada also, both
as
for
of
30.
right now.
And
But as they negotiate, I'm pretty sure they'll
and
have a
so
better
will this.
solution.
And so will this, because the 20 of the 30 is fentanyl. So to the extent that we remove that from Mexico and Canada, we're going to remove it from China as well. So we're basically in the same. Look, all the things you talked about, supply. I'm for that. I think we should have done that. All I'm saying is that they pushed aggressively to try to isolate China. And I don't really think they did. They really got what they were looking for. And in the meantime,
I don't know.
In the
Craig.
meantime,
I think there's some ripples that came out of that.
I think there's some
move,
huge
yeah,
ripples.
the ripples are small business in this country has been completely fucked because they have no ability to get goods, and they have no ability to move their supply chains as rapidly as Walmart and Home Depot and Lowe's and
I see. Look, I see your point on that. I think that is definitely a concern. But I think we were at 20% under Biden, and now Trump got an extra 10% tariff. I don't think 10% really change. Like, it's a little bit of an additional tax, and maybe the consumer pays a little bit more for baubles and certain things that small businesses manufacture. But what I do think it does is it lays the long term, and again, China reduced from this deal, they've gone down. Like they're lowering. They've agreed. Basent had a great talk about this, where he said, look, we met with them and we basically said, we need to rebalance this relationship. You guys need to buy more stuff from us. And I think China agreed. They basically said, Basent made the argument, look, we don't want to decoupling. We want to we want to have, we want to continue this relationship, and we want it to benefit both sides. And we do want to have strategic peace and entanglement there. That is good. but we've got to rebalance this. And I think China came away and said, you're right. I mean, you're not wrong, because this is unsustainable forever. Like, we can't have a nation that doesn't make anything and like can't defend itself. Like, it's gonna feel vulnerable, right? And that's what the U.S. communicated. That, I mean, that I think Basent did a great job, and they came to terms. And that 30% rate, that like China accepted that and said, okay, you're gonna do 30%. Like that, like we get, it's a tax, it's gonna increase costs, but it's sustainable, and it will encourage exactly what you said, maybe looking at diversifying that supply chain just a little bit away from certain things. And it kind of changes, the balance a little bit there. That's my thought on it. But it doesn't kill small business to now go from 20% tariffs on China to 30%.
I personally think, like, if you look at this year to 18 months from now, I would posit that you're going to see a 50% reduction in exports get diversified outside of China.
Interesting.
Which I personally think is kind of where we needed to go.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much dependency there. I mean, we
Yeah.
saw it with COVID. We saw it with, drugs. You see it with rare earths.
Mhm.
Fun story about rare earths, though.
Yeah.
Everybody's seen this game coming for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And rare earths aren't expensive.
Mhm.
So every company that has dependency on rare earths has been stockpiling them for the last decade. There's like 3 years supply of rare earths for like all industrial
I
manufacturing
didn't know that, but that's
processes.
actually fascinating.
Well, so I researched this a little bit because I was like trying to do some plays on like the rare earth junior miners. When this whole like conflict was going on, but yeah, it's not a lot of money. It's a couple $100 million a year. You have to have them to do manufacturing of semiconductors and magnets and whatnot, but you don't need that much, and they're not that expensive. So like everybody that's dependent on them has been stockpiling them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess, Craig, what else would you like to see out of this deal? What would make you happy with it? What would change you from a bearish outlook to a more bullish outlook?
It's not, well, again, the goal of what they're trying to do, I've been embracing and I've been supporting for quite some time. I think the implementation has been horrible. I think trying to isolate China originally was a very bad idea, and it's led to a slowdown and some damage in the economy, which is only going to start to show up in the numbers right now.
Yeah.
And we're going to start seeing that. I probably would say as early as tomorrow. There's retail sales reported tomorrow. Walmart reports tomorrow. We're going to start seeing some of that data play out here over the course of the next couple of weeks and months. Layoffs have already started to pick up and are starting to accelerate to some degree. So I think they created this idea that strategic uncertainty as a game theory negotiating ploy when you're negotiating against another person or another company makes sense. When you're negotiating on behalf of the entire country and you create strategic uncertainty, you created an uncertain environment for your consumers and your small businesses that has become a problem for the economy. So I'm concerned about that. That's why I wouldn't have gone about it that way. I also think we try to push aggressively China into an isolated point of view. And what did China do? They made deals with Vietnam, with Malaysia, making with Europe. They actually have a meeting with Japan. They had a
So did we, though, didn't we?
But these are China also met and has made a deal with Japan and Korea, right? Like these are countries these are competitors of theirs.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is that I think that this play where we tried to isolate China has backfired. It is what it is. And so from here, I just think that the administration, if they're serious about reorienting trade and manufacturing back to America, they need to pull through. 10% tariffs on China is not going to be enough.
No, but it's 30%. That's what I'm saying.
It's 10 plus 20, and 20
That's
is
30,
it's
right?
But 20 is fentanyl.
When you say that, what do you mean 20 is fentanyl?
There's a 20% tariff that is directly attributed to the fact that China, in theory, is making the precursors for fentanyl that they are actively working to eliminate. So to the extent that
So you're saying 20% will go away?
I'm saying 20% will go away, just like it will go away for Mexico and Canada when they procure the border. Now, this is the administration's way of keeping the drug war and fentanyl kind of top of mind. And I get it, but it's different than where they're going to end up. They're going to end up with that going away. So my point is 10% is really not enough. It's not really enough. And they kind of caved too quickly to the markets, and they caved to China so quickly that the rest of the countries of the world, when they're negotiating, they're gonna they're going to negotiate better deals for themselves and worse deals for America because they know that Trump and the administration has an Achilles heel here by bending to their knee to the markets. And so that's what I'm concerned about. And so they didn't basically the problem that I see is that the government and the administration has talked about bringing down inflation, bringing down yields, bringing down borrowing costs. And in order to do that, they needed to engineer a bit of a slowdown to get there. I felt like they were getting us there, and then they flinched. And so now what we have is likelihood of inflation not really, the back of inflation not really being cracked, and yields are now marching back to the highs again. And so, the scorecard for the administration being 10-year yields, I mean, we're back above close to 4.6% again.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
And we're up 40 basis points in 3 weeks since the cave. So they caved and yields have gone back up. So, there's a little bit of an issue there as you're a government that's going to have to try to refinance $10 trillion of government paper over the course of the next 12 months. Every basis point of yield being elevated is a problem. And when you don't slay inflation because you didn't allow growth to slow enough, the Fed is not going to help you.
Paul, can you ask Grok about the 30% tariff on China, and if that's if the plan is to take that away at some point, or is that part of the deal going forward?
Yeah, I mean,
I'd like to
well,
unpack that a little bit more.
It's temporary on the 90 days, right?
And,
No, I mean, this is my understanding of this is pretty much the basis of the new trade deal that's gonna. I mean, they've pretty much agreed to everything, and now they just got to finalize it. And both sides agreed very quickly and negotiated something very quickly. So I think both sides had strong motivation to get a deal done. And from watching Basent talk about it, it seemed like the message got through and they understood that they need to consume more U.S. products, and they have to rebalance the relationship a little bit because it's unsustainable.
What products is China buying from the U.S. besides like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble? Like what are they buying from the U.S.?
I mean, Trump has talked about, we're going to open up markets to China. Who even knows what he's talking about? They buy largely agriculture products from the U.S. That's
Cat
the big number.
is a big seller. John Deere, Boeing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But also a lot of agriculture, soybeans and beef
soy.
and pork and things like that.
Okay.
Let's see here. It's saying it's temporary for the 90 days. Let's see here. It does talk about the fentanyl thing that you mentioned, that this is the 20% duties on Chinese imports related to fentanyl. So that's part of it.
So that'll be good for the
it said
farmers.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and China's Vice Premier He Lifeng, which could lead to further adjustments. However, the temporary nature of the tariff reduction is clear from the initial period of 90 days. Let's see here.
I guess what my point is, if this is where we were going, we ended up in a place that we could have got to on Liberation Day without having done what we did to the economy and small business and kind of create this max uncertainty. If we were going to just end up at 10% on everybody and then let's negotiate.
Well, I mean, I think China is the biggest domino, and I don't know if they would have agreed to, doing. I don't think they would have agreed to take their tariff down by 10% and let us raise our tariff on them at the same time.
Whatever,
I don't think they would have agreed
Grok
to that.
is telling you is incorrect. Okay.
What do you mean it's incorrect? Like,
they did not reduce the tariffs that they had prior to Liberation Day. All they did
can
was
you look that up?
Just look at the Chinese.
I'm pretty sure they had it at 21.1%. That was the data that I looked at.
They have an average number of tariffs over a variety of different products set for years.
My understanding is the average is now 10% instead of 21.2%.
Yeah, I mean, just pull up the Ministry of Commerce statement. It basically it says we'll take the tariffs down, the additional reciprocal tariffs to 10%. Anything they had before that still exists. And then they added, and on top of that is just this blanket 10%, just like we put the blanket 10 plus 20
30,
on them. So
maybe you can do a little bit more research on that, Paul, and give us an answer.
We're getting into the weeds.
Well,
Probably
no, I mean, I think
that,
it's important to note that whether this was successful or not. I mean, if they had an average tariff rate on us for all goods of 21.2% prior to this, and now they've brought that average rate down to 10% total, then I think that's a huge win. And we've raised ours by 10%, from what we started with. That to me is a win. Now, if what Craig is saying is true, and there's still we've increased our tariffs on them by 30%, and then they have 10% in addition to the 21.2%, then it's still somewhat of a win, but not really, because now it's nowhere near as good of a deal as having them reduce theirs and raise ours essentially. Let's see here.
Yeah, I'll maybe get us out of the weeds a little bit.
Yeah,
I
get us out
do
of the weeds.
think broadly though, this is a if you're gonna live in a world with tariffs that doesn't have perfect free trade,
Yeah.
this,
think-
this was definitely something that needed to happen.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at sort of open markets, ultimately, like I'm, Cypherpunk, like I want everyone to have all the freedoms in the world. But if you're going to have national borders, you're going to have like governments and like that.
course,
That's like your
yeah.
baseline.
There's a national security element to all this.
Yeah. So like if we're going to have nation states, like
Yeah.
if we start there, right? I think when you think about these things, you also have to think about like the externalities of offshoring jobs, which I don't think that we've like done a good job of measuring or considering
Craig's talked a lot about that
over the last
fentanyl and all
20
this.
years, right? Fentanyl is a symptom
Mhm.
of disenfranchised low skill laborers not being able to make it in society, right? Because we've moved all jobs to China that they could do, and then we told them to learn to code.
Yeah.
Like the unfortunate nature of a population is you're gonna get a normal distribution in intellectual outcomes. So like not everybody can do,
Can learn to code.
can learn to code.
Yeah.
Right. So to have like a healthy society where you have, jobs where everybody can participate, you need some people that can go to a factory and put together widgets in somewhat of a low skilled and laborious way.
Uh-huh.
That is just like the nature of the distribution. And if you remove that, then you're going to disenfranchise that set of the distribution. You're going to have to put social welfare services in place in terms of like SNAP, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, right? And that is part of the cost of offshoring jobs, but it's not taken into account when the companies move the jobs offshore.
Yeah.
So there's a more holistic thing that you have to consider of those externalities when offshoring, and the government, again, in the context of nation states,
Uh-huh.
should be playing an active role in making sure that this is balanced.
Yeah.
And they have been derelict in their duties
True,
for almost the last 20 years, and that is why you manifestly have
Yeah,
this like
yeah.
crisis
Craig
of-
has raised all these points.
of like the middle class
Yeah.
and the fentanyl crisis in the upper Midwest. Like that has gotten stripped out because of politicians not doing their job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
No,
not
but
only,
I-
I mean, not only is China taking the job, like a lot of those jobs, which is great for China, but in addition to that, they're producing the fentanyl. It's
Yeah,
like
look,
a double
I mean,
fucking edged sword,
mean,
and there's huge cost to society and the rest of taxpayers that we have to bear the brunt of. The homeless population and the drug addicted population. And it's like it's not just like it's just on them. Well,
Well,
those costs affect.
I
everybody
mean,
else.
it's not just like a cost base. It's just being like apathetic.
It's true, true,
Sorry,
yeah.
sorry, not
It's both.
empathetic.
Yeah, empathetic for sure.
It's like you need to be empathetic to your neighbor,
Of course.
right? Like if you want to live in a civil society, like everybody needs an opportunity to participate.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna like look at our neighbor and be like, sorry, dude, you're gonna starve because like we're gonna optimize for lowest price goods possible.
Yeah.
Like that's how you're going to get like the crumbling of a society. But if we say, oh, we actually need these jobs because we have these people and, people get, dignity and satisfaction out of earning a wage than being on welfare, like you should provide that through government tariffs and regulations and support. And if we had been doing this well over the last 20 years, like Trump wouldn't be in the position to have to do this.
Yeah.
It's just we've been completely derelict. We've been beholden to the corporations, basically, who are saying we want to lower costs because that drives our shareholder value, which allows us to buy back the stock, which we have options in,
Uh-huh.
that advantages all of the people that lobby the politicians and makes the investor class richer. But we're doing that at the sacrifice of the middle class.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm saying this in the context of a nation state. If you told me like what is the optimality of the outcome, you wouldn't have the nation state. You wouldn't have tariffs. You had free movement of people and free
For
movement
sure.
of goods.
For sure.
But in the context in which we
Nation.
exist,
Yeah.
you need to do your job.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I-
There's no doubt that tariffs are a tax. I mean, the question is if we can get rid of I feel like the idea of getting rid of the income tax, which, falls back on us. And yes, for access to our markets, especially if we're exporting all these jobs and all this stuff, let's have that be the tax. And I think, Paul, I flagged something that I think the Treasury took in historic levels of income from the tariffs that have kind of already started. I don't know if you saw that, Craig, but
Yeah.
we've got Paul, you can find it in the take somewhere, pull it up. But
But
it shows it's red and
everything you're
green
saying
chart.
is. I mean, I've been saying this. I mean, this is exactly what I've been advocating for. And so what I'm annoyed about
Here
is
it
I
is.
feel like they were on this path to Trump is really I thought Trump was going to break some shit, right? I thought he was going to be like, you know what, this is bullshit. Where fentanyl crisis has killed hundreds of thousands of maybe even millions of people. We've hollowed out the middle class. We've sent all these jobs over to China, and those days are over. It's breaking our society. We're $35 trillion in debt. We can't afford that shit anymore, and so we're bringing it all home. And it's going to take me time, but the quicker we do it, the better. And so I'm going to break some things. And the markets are not going to like it, and we're going to have we're going to have some short-term pain. Remember, he's talking about short-term pain, a detox period, right? We talked about all this stuff, and then on the other side, it's going to be manufacturing jobs, investment in America, and the things that everybody likes, and a reduced trade deficit, and
It really feels like he's kind of doing what you're describing, though, Craig.
What he did was he started to go down the path.
Look at this chart here.
He started to go down this path, and then he got scared because the markets didn't like it, and all the people and the corporations and all his rich friends came to him and said, dude, this isn't cool. Like, we're losing a lot of money. And he went like, yeah, fuck it. Like, let's just go slow instead. And so that's the part that I'm like, you're disingenuous because you say you're Main Street over Wall Street. You're not. You say you're for the people. You're not. You say you're for small business over large. You're not, because all you do is tout large businesses coming to the White House, making tens of billions, hundreds of billions, $1 trillion investments. Meanwhile, small business is getting absolutely murdered. The common man continues to get crushed. But you and your friends keep getting wealthier and wealthier because now the stock market has rallied. And now he keeps saying, look, the stock market's going to moon. It's like, well, dude, like, people still you haven't corrected anything yet.
He's trying to have his cake and eat it too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think
that's what I'm annoyed about. That's all. I'm saying.
Craig, I think he might actually get his cake and get to eat it too. I mean, like look at this. I mean, the U.S. Treasury shocks with second highest, biggest budget surplus in history, thanks to record tariff revenues. And I think it's
1 month. It's the month of April. It's the month where we get our tax revenues.
Okay.
But look,
I mean,
the tariff revenue is good. It's good.
I would say this. I still think it was like a good move to kind of pit everybody versus China.
I think so too.
I think he should have let that one simmer a little bit longer than he did.
So?
Yeah, because basically if he could have kept the pressure on China, it puts pressure on all the other countries to strike good deals.
Yeah.
So to me, the markets had already like taken the medicine, so to speak. We already like come back up pretty well. VIX was below 20 again.
Yeah.
Like everything was like kind of okay. We didn't need to like strike this deal. We almost didn't want to strike this deal with China because we could have kept the pressure on every other country to strike the deal first. Right.
True,
and
true.
we would have gotten better deals with every other country. And all of those countries would be the competitive like down bidders against the Chinese tariffs. So if I was to criticize him,
yeah,
I think in some ways you have to be a little bit like violent in this like negotiation process, but I would have not struck any sort of deal with China until like I got one with India and I got one with Southeast Asia.
We got one with India. I think we agreed to like do like a zero. I think was it like actual
no official deals have been
official
signed,
deals, but an outline of a deal.
Well, and in some ways we are also working on like partial information. So like maybe they have these like
we don't know. We don't know behind the scenes what percent has agreed with
kind of like LOIs that are like working through already.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think that what they're doing is they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, right? They're trying to talk a tough road on trade, that they care about bringing back jobs, investment, and they're for the common people. But they also are cognizant, maybe too sympathetic to the power that the markets have. And so they're trying to play this pendulum back and forth. Well, the markets get a little bit too upset, we give them something, then the people get a little too upset, we give them, so my concern is right now we're basically now where yields on treasuries are just about back to
what they were.
What certainly they're higher now than they were on Liberation Day for the most part, and we need to get yields down. And the way to get yields down is by bringing down inflation. And
Trueflation is showing that we're like
but when
it's showing
but when
it's
you
going down
have
still.
but when you have a 30% rise in the stock market in a month, and Bitcoin, a 30% rise in Bitcoin, and wealth creation, again, you're not going to be able to create the necessary type of inflation reduction that's really necessary to bring yields down. That's the concern. And so right now, 30-year yields are basically back to 5% again.
Well, to play devil's advocate here too, there's a lot of things in the market that we don't probably have as much telemetry on that he has, right?
Yeah.
And
it's really
the thing is, you can say like you can inject pain into the market, that's fine, but we also know that the markets are systemically fragile. So to the point where you get like a cascading failure or withdrawing of liquidity, like he might have been privy to something that we weren't privy to, and that's ultimately like
true. We're working with incomplete information,
and this
here,
is what
it's,
happens.
It's much easier to criticize when you don't have the fog of war.
But this is what happens when you've created a society on printed money, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So
but like he didn't create it. He just doesn't necessarily want to create a liquidity crisis that actually does like break the whole system.
He did accelerate it in a big way, right? I mean, during his first term, I mean, what he did to blow out the deficits with the tax cuts. Was massive. This is even before COVID. Now, Biden did that at times too. I get it. But we can't forget what the Trump tax cuts did to the deficit. And now I think part of what the issue for yields is right now is what they're discussing with respect to this budget has a similar...
Sorry, I want to dig into that a little bit.
Well, the question is...
The deficit numbers, though, under Trump... Well, so you have the deficit numbers and you have M1. If we look at M1 from Trump, and maybe he can pull the chart up, I don't think like M1 went off the chart until COVID hit.
Of course, it didn't.
Right? Like it was actually, I think, coming down.
But look at the deficits.
Let's take a look here. But
like deficits are weird, right? Because like people are like just perpetual buyers of government debt.
Yeah.
So I don't know if like bond issuance is necessarily like directly related to inflation. It's really M1 that is, right?
Grok needs to fix this thing where they like don't do images. It's so annoying. I don't know why they have that and why they're doing it. They're like, we can't show you an image.
St. Louis Fed will have it though. If you just go to St. Louis Fed and look up M1. Yeah, just type in M1
obviously
and it'll bring it right
COVID
up.
exploded all this. They just used it as an excuse to just massively print, but
right, but part of the issue,
but tariff revenue offset. It could potentially offset the tax cuts.
Yeah,
it all makes sense, right?
go.
And then you tax
Scroll
your
down a little
citizenry and less, and they have more money to use in the economy. They have more money to use productively. They have more. Yeah, I mean,
it wasn't that bad.
No,
I
but
mean, you're talking like $500 billion, and then like it went vertical.
look,
I mean, yeah,
from
from 2010 to
Okay, but we went
2020, it's like it.
we went
everybody's
from,
the
we went
same,
from
right?
3 to 4 trillion. That's a 30% increase over Trump's first term before COVID. Like it's not small. The numbers are ridiculous now because of COVID.
I mean, look at that
but
straight up a line.
They
That's
weren't-
insane.
It's not like they were small. And pull up the deficits during 17, 18, 19. I mean, the tax cuts for the wealthy led to bigger deficits. They're just Biden accelerated that. COVID accelerated that. Biden kept them on too long. Now they're just out of control. So,
but on the good side, guys, the sooner this fiat hyperinflates and fails,
I don't know. I think that would be bad for a lot of people. I mean, I think
the better off we are.
I think there'd be war. There'd be a lot of problems if that happens. I'd much rather see it continue. I mean, the more people that wake up slowly and kind of see what's happening, they can kind of get off the ship. They're going to lose a little bit, but like, it's a much more orderly.
There's no orderly sinking of a ship.
You don't think so?
No.
I mean, I think
no. This is like okay. So like I've thought about this for a long time.
The S curve of adoption on Bitcoin, I'd like to see like 80 to 90% of like people owning some Bitcoin before the fucking ship sinks.
But that's not how psychology works. And the problem with psychology is like it acts as a cascade. If you look at like every hyperinflating currency, when it like
gradually,
truly it's gradually then suddenly. So like when it truly hyperinflates, it takes 18 months to do it.
Yikes.
And like that's historically. The problem is we live in a digital age where we have like so much faster contagion of ideas, right? SVB literally went under in 4 hours based off of one fucking tweet. So like in that environment, I'm talking like 18 months was like Weimar Germany in the 30s, not like today when we have Twitter. So like I don't know how you can get like this like smooth transition of this amount of wealth like out of the fiat system. It's going to happen in somewhat of a catastrophic way, but I think the important thing from like a crypto perspective is we have to develop tools that are like showtime ready, because if you don't have those, one of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to have a lot of chaos in society for like a longer period of time, or we're going to miss the window entirely, and the governments are going to come in with their wet dream version of a CBDC and remonetize into our Orwellian state where our social credit score, surveillance, and confiscation are just part of the money system.
Damn, that sounds a little scary.
But don't you feel like, I mean, look, Bitcoin's been around now, what, 16 years? And
I love this video by Bitcoin Magazine. You work for it, they print it out of thin air.
The amount of education that folks should have on this at this point is massive, right? I mean, like, we've been doing, people have been, talking about Bitcoin for a while. I mean, so hasn't the public been informed enough at this point, Matt, to say, you know what, if it happens fast, like you kind of had you've been told to buy, you've been told to get on board with the hard asset, money trade. Like, what are we waiting for?
Well, but you still can't survive in Bitcoin. So like, let's say like we just tomorrow didn't have dollars and you just had Bitcoin, like we'd still all be fucked, because we'd be like, I need to go buy stuff in Bitcoin right now, and like 5 TPS ain't gonna do it, right? So like, we technically like have this like harder asset, but if we literally like took
somewhat be used, but
like the dollar out of the equation. Yeah, but okay, Lightning is there, but even with Lightning, if we say the dollar is gone, it would still take 80 years to get everybody to be able to even open one channel, let alone do like a monthly close, which would be required for like actual use of Lightning on a transactional basis, where you're not perpetually paying,
I think,
interest and fees to the liquidity provider.
Worst case scenario, if this did happen, there would be there would be other blockchains would act as L2 intermediaries, essentially. Like you'd hold your Bitcoin and then you'd maybe transact on exchange
so what's going to so what you're saying is JP is going to like quickly jump in as a Bitcoin custodian, create an internal ledger for us to jigger it around our accounts with each other.
Who needs JP Morgan when you have
integrate it into Zelle
offshore exchanges?
And then we're just going to perfectly set them up to create fractionally reserved Bitcoin systems again.
Who needs JP Morgan when you have Trade Ogre?
No, but seriously. So like that's your like. We need to keep enhancing these systems so that they're actually ready to offboard fiat. Right. And if we don't do that, we're going to give the fiat guys like the opportunity to remonetize into a CBDC, or to completely own the Bitcoin based system in a way that, again, benefits them and allows them to fractionally reserve.
So wouldn't it be in the interest of the elite class or the old money class to actually have this happen sooner before Bitcoin is ready to take the mantle, because it's more likely that they'd be able to create this government-backed system before, Bitcoin was ready, right? So it would incentivize us it would incentivize government to actually have this hyperinflation happen sooner before the rest of the world, before Bitcoin was ready for it.
Well, I think we're I think we're in a race if we want to like recognize it or not, right? The fact that you have all of these governments that have been doing pilots with CBDC like things, the fact that you have stablecoin regulation going through the House. What is that? That is a CBDC in name only, because you're basically saying you're going to have the same type of characteristics that you wanted in a CBDC in terms of surveillance, in terms of confiscatability, in terms of monitoring in USDT and USDC. It's just not being issued by the Federal Reserve. But like that doesn't matter. And it's functionally going to be the same. And the European Union is trying to actually go live with something end of this year.
Yeah, that's
so
crazy.
We are in a race right now. They see that we're in a race. They know that this system is coming to an end, and they're preparing to catch it. So if we don't have a system that can alternatively catch it, like,
I feel like we already live in a CBDC system, though. It's like money's already kind of mostly electronic in banks, and like it's already surveilled and like report your transaction. Like I think I saw something absolutely insane in Spain right now. Paul, pull this shit up. I think if you try to withdraw over $3,000 worth of,
I think it was 1,000.
It's 1,000 euros.
1,000 euros.
Fucking crazy.
1,000 euros. Yeah.
What the fuck? Have they lost their fucking mind? Look at this. Go down. No, go down. Go down. Right there. There it is. España.
Oh, 3,000 euros.
If you want to withdraw 3,000 euros of your own money from your own bank account in Spain, the tax authorities want to know about it. Got Bitcoin ? I mean, that is wild.
There was also something about 1,000
so,
euros.
But like we're
Maybe
at
it's
10,000.
different, yeah.
We're at like 10,000 or
10,000.
5,000 is as they have to do a report on you. Here, $5,000 US.
Well, 600
But, like,
on Venmo now.
Yeah, fucking crazy. I mean, this is insane. This is Orwellian as fuck. I mean, I
and,
just
and then the other crazy part is you got to adjust that shit for inflation.
Right. Which
Too.
is,
Well,
it's
when
been
these
10,000
laws-
for 40 years.
the reason they got it, the reason they got this shit, I mean, you're an accurate point. The reason they got this shit through 40 years ago is because like $10,000 at the time, that's like the cost of like 2 houses. So like at the time they're like, oh, okay, if anybody wants to buy, like, that's a lot of money. But now slowly, like right now, it's like, you want to buy a car for cash, you got to, Uncle Sam's got to know about it.
I mean,
in
right now,
in 5 years from now, after the next big print, when they print 100 trillion, I mean, you're gonna buy an Xbox.
You're
They
gonna-
want to
you're-
know
you're-
about
you're-
it. Fill
you're-
out this report.
you're gonna buy your groceries.
Yeah, it's.
You're gonna
it's-
go for the groceries for your
yeah,
bi-weekly like
it's-
grocery
it's-
trip, and they're
I
gonna
don't know
wanna
how they've
about it.
gotten away with this. It's obviously unconstitutional. What the Bank Secrecy Act and all this shit is obviously blatantly unconstitutional. Somehow they've gotten away with it. I don't know how. I think somebody should sue and challenge us in court again, and I think they'd like the government. I think personally would lose based off of it violates the Constitution clearly.
Well,
I don't know how they got away with
it
it.
certainly violates. I believe it would be the Fourth Amendment.
The Fourth Amendment, yeah,
Yeah,
violates
right?
the Constitution, yeah,
Yeah.
totally insane. It's absolutely insane. Paul, I think I did the research on this. I saw this the other day. I don't think this is accurate. The guy didn't have $5,000 in his account, so
You're right. And I was actually just gonna say this is why I love community notes.
yeah, community notes are
right?
really
Give
cool,
you some
right? So
context.
you can,
But- the point, just circling back on Trump, maybe closing that loop for a bit, is I feel like he's stuck between these two worlds, right? This this populist for the people, for America, for digital money, for Bitcoin, like root out the fraud, root out the corruption, root out the deep state. But then he's also kind of holding on to this power structure where Wall Street could call him up and say, "Hey, can you stop?" And he does, and he likes getting those phone calls from Tim Cook or Jeff Bezos and the rich corporates of corporate CEOs. So he's like playing again. He's like you said before, having your cake and eating it too. He's kind of still playing both sides. And for me, I want him to push. I want him to be
go down, Paul.
I want him to be that person who goes down
Stop
that
right there.
populist route and kind of put the deep state to bed. But he's not. He's not there. I mean, he's doing more than anybody else has done, but it doesn't seem like it's enough.
The Bill Ackman quote.
I
about
would,
that, Paul.
I would argue again. We're probably being devil's advocate, acting on some reduced amount of information here.
Yeah.
Right. Like I believe that politics, no matter how much you want to disrupt the system, it's still like a chess game. There's
Yeah.
still like pieces on the board, and there's like certain moves you can make,
Yeah.
and there's certain pieces that you can sacrifice, and like certain pieces you can't.
Yeah.
And so, if you look at like what he did with Doge and just like locking people out of, USAID.
Oh, brilliant! Look,
And just like taking their database, shutting it down, and just like firing everybody, like that is pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
Like let's be fair. And he's done that with multiple agencies, like Department of Education.
you can't even
like,
believe
gone.
the level of
USAID,
corruption is unbelievable.
gone, right?
Like,
And-
how is this even happening? How are they doing this with our tax dollars? Like, I literally how are these people not literally like hung for treason? I mean, this is insane.
Aren't
But I guess my point here is like those actions still make me optimistic that he is trying the best he can with the pieces that he has on the board. We just don't see the full board. If he was like an emperor or a dictator or something, yes, like I think he could do all these things. I just think
I
there's
guess,
limitations
yeah.
to
No,
what
that's
he can
fair.
operate. And he's like
He's
of
pushing the
all
limits of what he can possibly do.
like political outcomes that you
Yeah.
could imagine.
Yeah.
Like he's going pretty fucking hard.
He's going
I-
fucking
I
hard for
guess-
the
Right.
for the U.S. system where
That's
we've got
fair.
checks and balances
you're
on
right.
power. The U.S. system has checks and balances on power. Like he's pushing it to the limits of what he's capable to do.
Yeah.
And he has the mandate from the people of the United States.
that's
of
what
America.
that's what I was
you know?
going to say is he's in theory this is his only term, right? And so he's not running
Yeah.
for re-election, and so
I don't
he-
know.
and he-
Trump 2028 hats came out.
and he
Yeah,
has. So
he's
he
jo-
has,
but he's trolling,
He has
you know?
but he has that mandate, right?
Yeah.
Where he.
We're like
he
110
should
days in. I
be-
mean, a lot of shit
he
has
should
happened
be-
in 110 days.
I feel like he should be able to go hard. And I think a lot of the things which he's done, which have been good, but to me, it's like a little bit of low hanging fruit, like stuff. Like, so you got to come after some of the big stuff. Now, look, I mean, RFK coming after pharma, like that's a big one, right? This whole, I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk about that, but
Yeah.
this most favored nation stuff on drug pricing, like pharma's a big that's a big one, right? If he's really to really go after pharmaceutical
Yeah, they
companies
are.
and try to bring like that's a big.
My
is he gonna go
favorite-
after big media? Is he gonna go after big food? Like those are the.
I love RFK, by
Did-
the way.
Did you like my funny
Yeah.
was like when the Coca-Cola lobby like sent the people to argue for like sugary whatever he said for like Snap or whatever. Like they were like, you know, Snap shouldn't be have anything to do with nutrition, and like RFK Jr.'s like it's literally called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So they've got like the lobbyists there trying to argue for like why we shouldn't target Coca-Cola or whatever.
Put some red 40 and caramel color in our
Yeah.
drinks.
It's like if I were I don't know, obviously I'm on that seat of power, and I will never be, but when you have it's like you have the most mandate, you have the biggest mandate at the beginning, right? And you're only likely to you're more likely to lose the mandate than to grow the mandate. So in the beginning, you should try to tackle the biggest things, not the smallest things. And so I'm not saying USAID ID it wasn't a big thing, but dollars wise, it's not as big as some of these other things that he could tackle.
I mean, it's fucking infuriating. But the problem is what they're doing is they're like literally they're taking our taxpayer dollars, they're giving it to NPR and like all these liberal outlets and liberal fucking things and like funding propaganda that they're now showing us on television. Like that's our taxpayer money is literally coming full circle to brainwash us. They're literally using these NGOs as slush funds for all their family members, like shuttling out billions of dollars here, billions of dollars there. And like, it's all a giant kleptocratic fucking scam. Pull up the post here by Bill Ackman, Paul, the one I had you flag. The United States has subsidized the world on trade, defense, drugs, NGOs in quotation marks, and more. Our global subsidy has contributed to our $37 trillion of national debt. President Donald Trump is the first president in history to rectify this situation. He deserves enormous credit for doing so. I agree. I mean, like, you know, looking at the breadth of the fraud, like Doge publishes this stuff, like it makes my fucking blood boil. Like reading what they're finding, like where the money's going. Like it's so infuriating. And then like just to hear these morons come out, like the AOCs and the Bernies and the Elizabeth Warrens, and say, you know, we need more taxes, we need this, we need that. It's like, quit fucking wasting our money on bullshit, you know. And this also applies to both sides of the aisle. Like, you know, why are we spending half our budget on literally a war budget? Like, this is insane. We cannot afford to be doing this.
I also want to like make sure that we don't forget history a little bit here too. The bureaucracy in the U.S. government and these unelected officials has more money and bureaucratic power than any other organization on the planet.
It's unbelievable.
But let's talk about how that manifests. They tried to kill him in October.
Yeah.
Okay? Like clearly they tried to kill him. And
Yeah.
I also have to point out they did not miss. When that round left that rifle,
Moved his head at like the last minute.
No, you can count it actually. So the flight time of that round, assuming 2,200 feet per second, would have been 200 milliseconds. He moved his head 100 milliseconds before he got clipped. That means he literally dodged a bullet after it was in flight. He was dead.
That is hard to believe.
He was fucking
That's
dead.
crazy.
They tried to kill him, and he,
I
by
think-
the grace of God,
it honestly
did
feels that
that,
way. There's some kind
right?
of fucking like,
But
there's some kind of divine,
Greater power.
like greater power at work. It
But-
just
but-
feels
but-
that. It
but-
honestly feels that way.
But with whatever
Yeah.
ever shortcomings we think he might have, you have to realize that's the size and that's the attribute of the thing that he's fighting. So, like, we still have to put that in context.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, yes, we always want him to do more, but, like, he's done a lot given what he's fighting, I think. And given the actions that he's taken, I'm willing to give him a
That's
benefit
how
of the
I
doubt
feel.
on a
I feel
lot
like
of things.
we're
here.
110 days in, and like, you know, we can critique and criticize, and I think it's valid. You know, like I don't have like I love to platform Craig because he talks like he criticizes, right? Like let's discuss it, debate it. You know, I don't always agree with it, but you know, it's a valid viewpoint, right? But yeah, I mean, there's got to be some grace here, and I think incredible things are being accomplished, and I'm bullish and optimistic for the future. The deregulation, potential new income coming in from tariffs, restructuring the global economy a little bit around that. You know, I think is like we talked about is an important thing. You know, let's see how it looks when we get to the other side when all these deals get negotiated. Let's see if there are structural changes to your point that, you know, I don't think it has to be like a dramatic, like, you know, right now, all of this. I mean, we are getting manufacturing investment. I think the Saudis announced or was it the Saudis or
Yeah,
Qatar,
Qatar, yeah.
$1.2 trillion just yesterday. I mean, like, that's a massive amount of capital coming into the U.S. to be invested here. I mean, like, that's unbelievable, right? Like, in one day, from one little nation, we just got $1.2 trillion worth of investment into our domestic manufacturing economy, jobs here in America. That's unbelievable, I think. You know, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? So, you know, I do want to take it to our next thing here, where, Paul, I want you to play this speech. I think this is going to be a very historic, important speech. It's a speech that Trump gave. I think it was, I want to say it was in Saudi Arabia, but it could have been.
This was a pretty good speech.
It's an incredible
Yes,
speech.
about defense you're talking about? The one you're talking
No,
about?
he was just basically talking about his foreign policy and, like, essentially defining what we've kind of all felt and known. It just marks a dramatic turn from the establishment of both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party historically.
It definitely was the antithesis of American World Police. America.
Well, let's see if you can find this.
Fuck
Yeah,
yeah.
play this right here. JD
Coming
Vance
to save the mother.
plays this.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Play this. I mean, this is just a clip from it, but yeah, look.
This is Trump's plea for the Nobel Peace Prize.
This is going to be a historic
In
speech
recent
one day.
years, far too many American presidents have been afflicted with the notion that it's our job to look into the souls of foreign leaders and use U.S. policy to dispense justice for their sins. They loved using our very powerful military, and now it's really the most powerful it's ever been. We just are getting a budget approved, $1 trillion, highest budget we've ever had in history for military, $1 trillion. And we're getting the greatest missiles, the greatest weapons. And, you know, I hate to do it, but you have to do it because we believe in peace through strength. You have to have the strength, otherwise bad things could happen. But hopefully we'll never have to use any of those weapons. Seems to be an awfully big waste of money if you're never going to use them, but hopefully we'll never have to use them because the destructive power of some of those weapons are like nobody's seen before. I believe it is God's job to sit in judgment, my job to defend America, and to promote the fundamental interest of stability, prosperity, and peace. That's what I really want to do.
Now, there was another clip of him saying basically that he rejects the interventionists. Can you find that part of the clip? It was part of the speech. It's like really, I think, really powerful. He said something along the lines of, you guys built this beautiful. It's a great kind of.
Well,
lines.
I have to point out there's a bigger meta there, and if you look at like how the government takes power and how the bureaucracy grows and how the military grows and how the footprint grows ever since
Go down one
the
more.
Second World War,
Charles Martin.
it has been
Play that.
because
That's the one. That's the clip. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
It has been because we use moral arguments to justify what we do.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he's basically saying, like, we shouldn't be using moral arguments. We're like,
Yeah.
we have to promote democracy and freedom around the world. Why? Like, how is that our job? Like, these are all societies. They all have nation states. They all
Yeah.
have, like, their structures. Like, what makes the U.S. the ones that need to, like, create
Yeah.
this imposition? And if you look at, like, Korea, you look at, like, Vietnam, you look at everything about U.S. foreign policy, it's always been these excuses
Yeah.
to spend money on USAID. It's all these like
yeah.
subjective moral like
Bullshit,
arguments
But
about
it's not. It's also supported. The U.S. military industrial complex.
No doubt,
right?
no doubt.
And
Play this one, Paul. This was part of the speech that I found was like, this is a significant moment. I mean, it really does represent the end of the U.S. with hard power being the policeman of the world, I think, and returning to more of a soft power, like, hey, like, we're going to succeed. We want everyone else to succeed. And, if you, like, you're free to emulate us. We're the house on the hill. Like, we can help you do that if you want, but we're not going to come in and fucking, kill 100,000 people because, we think you might have a nuclear weapon, or, we don't like the fact that you're going off the US dollar, or, whatever other policy disagreement we have. We don't like what you're doing to your citizens, right? Or whatever. Paul, can you play this?
just unmute it.
Of course.
Yeah. Let's get it.
And just on that note, I think, like they say, all roads to hell are,
All the roads to
Paved.
hell are paved on the
on good
good
intentions, right?
intentions or something like that. Yeah.
And that's how these things typically start, and then
Yeah.
they get exploited.
And it's crucial for the wider world.
Are you able to turn that up a little bit, or is it max?
Transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
Wow. That is quite a powerful speech, I think. Like, when I watched that, I was like, they're going to play this speech one day, and like it's going to be like one of those speeches, you know, like JFK, one of JFK's speeches or Ronald Reagan's speeches. Like that marks a turning point, like I think just in the way the world operates. You know, I think as Trump is, if he's successful in dismantling all of this, like, you know, these slush fund NGO bullshit, you know, interventionist, deep state type of CIA regime change operations and all the bullshit, if he can really like dismantle all that, I think it will be very hard, even if he's, you know, even if someone else comes to power, to reinstitute that type of machinery that existed. And I really do think this marks a changing of how the U.S. treats the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And I think it's for the best, right? I really do. I think each country should really.
I mean, not only do I think it's right for the right reasons, but what he didn't say, which is important, I think, is we can't fucking afford to do it anymore either.
Yeah, I think you did say that $37 trillion.
Yeah, I think that's important. And so maybe, you know, is it possible that he would have thought differently if we weren't in these who knows? It doesn't matter. We are in these deficits.
Yeah.
We need to be focusing more on American citizens and what goes on here, and if that means retrenching from the rest of the world and forcing, you know, other countries to pay up for NATO or to pay up, like, I don't know, what are we in 150 countries? We have military bases in certainly over 100 countries. Why? I don't know. I know we talked about that a couple times ago, but yeah, look, I think retrenching that footprint globally makes a lot of sense, and it's going to have the benefit of reducing our, you know, hopefully over time we can reduce that defense budget, right? I don't know why we're spending over $1 trillion. I know he's talking about raising it, you know, but maybe next year we'll be able to take it down because it's, you know, he's been successful in you know, removing us from those positions of presence overseas, and
Yeah.
I think it makes a ton of sense. And look, if that means that, you know, the U.S. loses its place as the exclusive global hegemon in the world, okay. I mean, the world has existed for thousands of years without some unitary, you know, hegemon at the foreground. And if it means that the dollar loses some of its hegemonic properties, or the U.S. Treasury Security Act, you know, loses its hegemonic status as a global neutral reserve asset, that's okay too. I mean, I think
it might actually do the opposite. I think it'll actually entrench it more. I think, you know, the soft power is a lot more effective than hard power in a lot of ways.
We don't know. But if that's the ultimate reality, is that we have a much weaker dollar and we have higher yields that forces discipline on politicians, and that may be ultimately a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think we should be fearful of this, and I appreciate that he's you know, moving in that direction. I think it makes a ton of sense, and going after that military industrial complex, I think, is, to your point earlier, like, it's going to ruffle some feathers, right? I mean, if, you know, they may find some better shooters, God forbid. But I mean, you know, this is a dangerous game given the elite, entrenched, deep state, you know, that's been at the foreground of, you know, American politics for a long time, but certainly since 1945. Hopefully, you know, he can push him off.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple interesting waypoints here, right? When we talk about the military-industrial complex, right, the first time that was really coined, I believe, was by Truman
Yeah.
when he left. And that's like...
Yeah. He kind of gave a warning, like, hey.
This is the 50s,
Yeah.
right? He said the intelligence agency, i.e. the CIA, and the military-industrial complex is like overrunning the elected authorities and the
Yeah.
executive branch. And then Kennedy got shot, like 5 years later, right? And I potentially would argue that we haven't had an installed president up until Trump. I think every other president between Kennedy and Trump was like...
You kind of had to play within the field of play that you...
Well, I think it was decided by like those powers that be in the military industrial complex and in the CIA that like allowed those people to like become president.
Yeah, I think
right?
it's when they realize that you're a threat to that, they mobile. Like I think we saw this with Trump in 2020. I really do believe they stole that election. I mean, I think they cheated for weeks and fucking finally stuffed it and got it over the finish
well, I
line.
mean,
that's my personal
15,
belief. after looking at
15
the
million
evidence and
voters
data.
disappeared like in this election cycle
Yeah.
versus
I think
the
they
last one
I
where
think
15 million voters magically appeared.
Yeah, I think they harvested tons and tons of votes, and they just had this. They were able to kind of stall out to get those votes, and they found that UPS thing. I mean, there's just so much there that it's like there's so much smoke. You know,
Well,
what they did in Fulton County, Georgia, and how they're
you
still
don't
fighting
even have to
looking at
talk
those
about
ballots.
smoke here,
yeah,
right?
it's
Like
absolute fire.
You can come to like very specific examples that were just extrajudicially like took place.
Mm-hmm.
Pennsylvania, for example, they literally changed the rules. A bureaucrat went against the Constitution and said, "No, guys, it's cool. You can let new ballots come in for another 10 days."
Yeah, they caught
And
them
then the
all.
Supreme
They
Court
caught 'em all.
refused to hear it because it said that it didn't matter because it
Yeah.
hadn't happened yet. And then after the fact, they said
Yeah.
it doesn't matter because it already happened. What the fuck are we talking about,
Yeah, that's
guys?
what they do. I mean, it's
like
all,
they literally just
it's total fraud.
stole
They caught him.
Pennsylvania,
they caught him this election
straight
right
away.
The guy Scott Pressler who was on the ground there, they tried to stuff like couple thousand ballots in.
No,
like,
no,
the last day
but
of
like I'm not even
drop-offs,
like
and they
there's
caught it immediately.
There's a ton of stuff here.
Yeah.
There was like shit coming out of Detroit. It's
Oh,
like,
it was
what's going on?
unbelievable.
There's videos out of Georgia where it's like we're wheeling suitcases out and scanning ballots.
The fact
right?
checkers come out the same night and say, "Oh no, this is just
They're not
normal
suitcases.
procedure."
They're Pelican cases or something, right?
Fact check false.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
No,
this is
but
fucking
like you
unbelievable.
don't even have to like talk about that. You just have to talk about the fact that literally in Pennsylvania, they just like let a bureaucrat say like we're going to go against the Constitution of the state, and then we're not going to let this go through the courts.
Yeah.
Like what the fuck?
Yeah, in the Detroit, it's like I think they had like of 1,000 poll watchers, I think like 6 of them were Republicans.
Right?
I mean, like that situation should never arrive. That's so corrupt. I mean, so fucking corrupt. They're still fighting in Georgia to get access to these 200,000 ballots, and like the state is doing everything. I mean, the judges is not even hearing the case. They got the judge sitting on it. He's like, we were like 4 years into this thing. The judge is like, it's on his docket, but he's just not hearing the case.
What kills me about all of this stuff is the people who are against voter IDs.
I mean, there's
which is like
fucking crazy.
absolutely crazy to me after COVID because like you would go to states like California and you'd like walk into a coffee bar.
They'd be like, "Show me
and
your
they'd be
fucking
like,
COVID
"Show me
passport."
your vaccination papers." I'm like, "What the fuck, man? You guys don't require voter ID?" And you're like making me show you a medical record so I can come have a coffee.
They
like,
know what they're doing. They know
like,
I mean,
what
this
is going on?
This
here?
is all
This
by
is
design.
Crazy.
I mean, you know, there's a reason they're importing 20 million illegal aliens, and they don't want voter ID, and you know, they're bringing them to all these swing states, and they want them included in the census. I mean, this is all by design. It's all part of the.
Show me your papers.
Yeah. I knew it was like, you know, I knew it was like coming from the government, and it was all designed because, you know, I have a buddy who does like defense contract work, and like when I start hearing him like make the arguments of why it was all good when it first started, I know he's talking to people inside these intelligence agencies. So I know it's coming from that. It's all by design because like the narrative is coming. He's like, to be honest, bro, like we really need to bring in more people, and we got to have a, you know, higher population, and we need to just allow all these illegals to come in. It's just important. You know, like I get those, like, you know what I mean? So when I started to hear that, I'm like, okay, I know who you're selling your goods to, and I know what they're fucking telling you. You would never say that by yourself. Like that's never been your point of view, you know?
Who doesn't require voter ID?
Dude, that's like the law in
Literally
every liberal blue swing state
doesn't
that
require
is,
voter ID.
Yeah, that's
So
like,
you can go vote without your ID.
oh,
No. If you try to show them
how you
your
put it
ID,
away.
They'll
in
say, no, we
California,
can't
like,
see.
no, put that away.
we can't see it.
But we can't see your ID. They will like tell you to
That
like
doesn't make sense.
don't
Dude,
show them your ID.
It does make sense if you're cheating. So like I have actually my one of my he's no longer with us in this world, but this guy just like he was one of my mentors growing up, and he was my guidance counselor in high school. And he recently passed in a couple years, him and his wife, but his name was Neil Curley, and his uncle, I believe, was a famous corrupt politician in Boston who got elected. I want to say it was Boston, who got elected while he was in prison. So I think his name is James something Curley or something like that. But I did all the research on it, and like it was just really interesting to like look back on it. And basically they've been cheating forever. And he just explained to me, he's like, now with the machines it's so easy, but back then we actually had to have, what we would do is we'd have people that there's no voter ID, so we'd have like the on election day, all the unions would basically have no work. You're off that day, so they would just essentially they'd pull all the obituaries for like the past 4 or 5 years, and then they would have all the names, and they just hand them to people, and they walk in and say, "You're John James, and you're Tommy, you're Tommy Johnson, and you're Sally Sue." And he said, like, when you were in the union, that's what you did. Like, you just did it because you're protected, right? Like, that's your money, you're getting protected, and this is what you're doing. So those people would just go in and cast the votes, and he's like, that's how we did it back in the day. And he just tells me the stories about it, and like, this guy's got pictures. Like, when I go to his house, he's like, yeah, here's me with Martin Luther King, and here's me with John F. Kennedy, and his like. He's got handwritten letters from like for his wife was like did the tea parties for John F. Kennedy when he got elected. So like she's got like handwritten letters from like JFK, like, thank you so much, Joan, for doing this. It's like really cool, like history. I wanted to get him on a podcast or something to like record all these historical things before he passed away, but it just unfortunately happened suddenly, and that's life sometimes, sadly. But it was just interesting how they've been cheating for so long, and this is why like they have to have this like 80 level IQ narrative that's like voter ID is racist. Like, you need ID.
No.
And people actually believe this. Like, I can't.
This is the amazing part
at Walmart with an ID. Like,
it's just like, yeah, you can't go on a plane, you can't go to a bar, you can't go to you can't do anything with that ID. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like,
but here's the most fun about it. They say requiring voter ID is racist because minorities aren't smart enough to get on a computer and figure out how to get ID, which is like a blatantly racist statement.
Did you see this?
So like, it's.
Did you see this? The mayor of New York, Kathy Hochul, try to like say this on a thing. She had a whole thing about how it was racist, and so it was just the craziest thing.
I mean,
some
like,
black dude did a skit on it where he was like did a comedian, and he just like he had her playing her thing, and it was him in his room like just pretending to be like fucking just like stupid as fuck. Like, how do you open up a computer? Or just like classic. That was classic humor.
Well, the thing that like just hurts my soul about it and about COVID, is like when you read a book like 1984, and you're like, oh, this is like double speak, and we literally make words have the meaning that are opposite of the meaning of the words, and you read that as a kid, you're kind of like, okay, this is a little bit of hyperbole to like try to make your point here, and then suddenly we find ourselves in a world, and they're literally doing it in the same sentence.
Of words. I mean,
it's just like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
And yet, if you get a private label credit card, it has to be explained to you in English because the paperwork will be sent only in English, and it can't be explained in Spanish because then there might be some sort of confusion.
Yeah.
Make it make sense.
One of the commenters just said,
"Do we have what do we got?"
The interviewer, speaking of this comedic, video that you were just talking about, where the black guy, is essentially highlighting the absurdity of this claim that they can't get IDs.
Yeah.
Essentially, the interviewer himself said that all the black people he knows have ID. Right?
I've never met I don't have any black friends.
It's not a race thing, but just to summarize this bullshit, what it is, like you said, it's double speak. It's essentially perverting the meaning of words. Why are they trying to accomplish this? Because they want to not have IDs so that they can have non-citizens vote.
Of course.
So
I mean,
they
want
can
to be able to
essentially
cheat.
strip us of our constitutional rights.
Of course, yeah.
Right? That's the ultimate end goal. And
they want to dilute our votes and,
exactly.
put in who they install who they want.
And they want to go back to a essentially master and peasant serf class, where they don't know their constitutional rights. They're escaping another country where, the average, essentially the average quality of life was below American, and so they're happy to be here. They're not going to question authority, essentially ushering in a socialist paradigm. But we're not having it. And speaking of that, join us at Bitcoin 2025, where you will meet fellow like-minded people who are advocating for sound money, because we must defund this deep state operative. You know, this,
Yeah,
this,
I think that's the most attractive thing about sound money is that, all this funny business bullshit, where you can control the money printers and control, where all the money goes, that really changes when you're using a sound money and, more decentralized systems. I mean, you just kind of remove these leeches from the system, whether it be in Washington, D.C., like you told me on another earlier, where it's like this artificial place that really shouldn't exist.
Precisely. So that being said, Bitcoin 2025 is coming up. It's going to be an awesome event, huge event in Vegas. If you want a free ticket, right? These are going for around $700 a ticket. Then comment in the live chat. Drop a comment, drop a question, just engage with us, and we will give you a ticket. We've got a lot to give away, and we want to have a great time out there. We'll meet in real life. So drop a comment or drop a question and refer this chat. That being said, one of the viewers did ask a question here that I think y'all will do a great job answering.
All right.
And that is from @core_block. How can the current import-export tariff structure affect the country's technological innovation or blockchain industry?
I've actually
let you
wanted to
take
make
this
this comment for a wee minute here.
Make it. Go for it.
When we talk about manufacturing, we typically have been trained to think of it as being low-skilled labor. But there is second and third order things that are not that entirely. So like when we look at like China's advantage in robotics, like that stems from their advantage in people being able to build systems that assist in manufacturing.
Yeah.
Right. So like having the manufacturing process creates
A
robotics
need,
engineers
a demand. Yeah.
and it creates control engineers and it creates like a lot of high skilled jobs, which, maybe you have 90% like low skill, which again, we said we already needed, but you're also missing out on all of that high skill stuff, which is facilitating the low skill stuff at an efficient operating pace, right? The design of those factories, the design of those systems, like all that is like actually very high skilled work. And not having that ability in America and where we have to then import those systems from China makes our manufacturing base just more and more dependent on China, even if we're, having the low skill workers. So like it's not an isolated thing where it's just like Joe Blow is, using a screwdriver to put together the widget.
Yeah.
There's a lot of downstream effects that we don't get benefit from that is both important from a technology standpoint and just like a geostrategic resilience standpoint, because like those same engineers are like the ones that can contribute to not just manufacturing consumer widgets, but military products. If we
that kind of answers the
medical
part
products,
of Core Block's
everything
question
else.
here. We talked about country's technological innovation. If we don't have some level of domestic protection for manufacturing on some level, I mean, it is a national security risk, but it also has technological innovation, implications of what you're saying. What about blockchain? I mean, that's an interesting aspect of it. I don't know.
Well, just considering what our previous administration was doing, right, driving all of Web3.
Yeah, but
innovation
he's
on-
talking about when it comes to import-export tariff structure. That's not the same exact thing.
It's different.
I don't know if that really affects blockchain per se.
Well, I'll say it's potentially interesting because it's going to create advantages for some type of gray markets that might be able to use blockchain settlement.
So that's second order knock-on effects. Paul, is the live chat working? People are texting me saying that the live chat's not working.
The live chat is working.
Okay, somebody commented on our thread too. They said
But
not seeing
clearly,
the live chat.
to your point, I mean, COVID exposed America so deeply with respect to how ill prepared we were and are for that, but also for a future where we have to maybe fight a war, right? I mean, just having lack of critical materials and critical supply chains here for pharmaceuticals, for a variety of other critical goods, let alone steel, aluminum, all the other things that we're moving towards now. Just I think Trump saw that, so it was so obvious how deficient we were, and we're like, we can never let this happen again. That's why everything is a national security risk. That's why we're using national security policy to implement these tariffs and to try to accelerate production and manufacturing and kind of, pushing through historical red tape and environmental things and other things that would have prevented fast tracking. We're just like, no, we need this shit. We need it now. We need it yesterday. And we should be pushing even more aggressively in that direction. And so I think, whether it's steel, aluminum, copper, we're going to pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, like we should be making it all here. And to your point, just the benefits of doing it, it's self-fulfilling, right? We put more engineers to work. They're going to be more likely to create even new innovations. And look, we need to catch up, frankly. I mean, China is the leader in robotics. They're a leader in electric cars. They're a leader in drones, right? I mean, they've moved so aggressively away from making cheap toys and textiles that it's I think people have an anachronistic view of what Chinese manufacturing is. Chinese manufacturing is world class, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
We need to catch back. We need to catch back up.
Yeah.
Well, on a smaller scale too, like the ability to crowdfund, things that you may want to import from a small, from someone in Nigeria or something. I think blockchain gives us that ability too to kind of tap into other markets or even have something that's like a new supply chain created through blockchain that allows other people to tap into it without having to go through the intermediary process of like brokers, or it just allows you to tap directly to the source through the blockchain. That's something that's not here yet, but
There's definitely implications for transparency and for visualizing supply chains and seeing things on chain. You did want to say something about this. I think you sent to Paul, Jeff. It did talk about Chainlink. It says, we're excited to announce the successful completion of a cross-chain delivery versus payment transaction in collaboration with Connexus by JP Morgan and Ondo Finance. The milestone marks the first of its kind cross-chain atomic settlement of a tokenized asset between Connexus Digital Payments Permission Blockchain Network and a Layer 1 blockchain network. Powered end-to-end by Chainlink runtime environment, the transaction involved the exchange of Ondo Chain's short-term U.S. government treasury fund as the asset leg, with Connexus's digital payment network serving as the payment leg. Since inception, the Connexus platform has exceeded $1.5 trillion in notional value, processing an average of more than $2 billion daily in transactional volume. Payment transactions have grown by 10x year over year. So I really do think there's a strong argument for a multi-chain future, and I think that's what you're going to see. And Chainlink has always acted as their whole model is kind of like they're this middleware piece to take information and data and plug that across chains. So yeah, I think it's kind of cool.
Trusted protocol, and also Vinex, or that what was it?
Connexus.
Connexus is JP Morgan's private blockchain, so that would you would have to have like a 1-for-1. You can't have it fractionalized because that could create a bank run or a real world asset. It can create. You can't have a shortage because if everyone decided to take it off the private chain, you can't settle onto a public chain.
Yeah. What do you think about this, Dr. K?
Oh, private blockchains. I've never bought into permissioned private blockchains just because the nature of the permissioning is sort of creating a bilateral trust agreement, which you could make without requiring a blockchain. Because literally there's a bilateral trust agreement.
Yeah,
so,
but I mean, you do have the ability to, like we're saying here, you can move from that, what you're describing, to a public blockchain. And
yeah, but
interoperability
I could still do that out of a permissioned, database with a bilateral agreement that doesn't need a blockchain to do it. I could interface with Ondo directly out of my system, which is a debt, into the Ondo blockchain. Just
could Chainlink provide a kind of this permissionless, decentralized verification of that with your permission blockchain?
Well, but
when
does the permissionlessness matter if you're coming out of a permission system, right? Fundamentally, it only becomes permissionless when it hits the public chain. But even then, it's still a receipt back to a single counterparty, right?
Interesting thought.
Right. So in much the same way that you can say, USDC on Ethereum is a receipt, and that can circulate in some degree of permissionlessness, assuming properties of Ethereum and that you don't get your transaction censored and you don't get your money confiscated by Circle. But the redeeming party is still going to be Circle, right? Yeah. So it circulates in some way, but it only exists as a permissionless asset in the chain. It doesn't actually. But it still comes back to the redeemer to kind kind of have value. So in this particular setup, like I would argue that you're not actually permissionless until you're circulating openly. It looks like on Ondo, right?
But it looks like my understanding of this is they did this in a way that, you know, they moved from this permission chain to a permissionless chain without actually getting permission and having to have somebody sit there and process that. It was kind of just done. It was automated in a sense. Like once you're in that permission environment, like yes, it's a private kind of blockchain. But if you want to take it, you can just do it using something like Chainlink, where it's like you press a couple buttons and then boom.
Well, in that permission blockchain,
guess.
like still
I don't know.
somebody in that blockchain is still like creating the operation that allows it to exit the blockchain.
True.
You're just linking it
But
out
you're
with
not.
Chainlink.
But it's
right?
more.
Middleman.
I guess what I'm saying is it's more efficient because you're not going to the banker and saying, "Hey, I want to take my treasury and move it over to this block." Like it's just an automated process.
Instant
Right.
automated.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting technological breakthrough. I think to see the development.
Well,
of it.
no, I mean it's cool to like
Yeah.
see the systems linked together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just saying like it's very much permissioned until it gets to the open chain and then it becomes permissionless.
I saw a one thing I want to touch on today before we go is this idea. I saw like a quote. It said something like the past 4 to 8 years. Or I guess you can talk about inflation real quick first. It looks like inflation came in lower than expected. So, Craig, what do you think on that? Is that you know,
Just
the
real
argument is that
quick,
inflation, from everything that I'm seeing, like I'm not seeing any evidence that inflation's going up. I mean, it looks like all objective measures, inflation is still going down.
From what I understand, isn't it still going up, just not as fast? Isn't that what the
Well, inflation itself means that,
Right.
yes, but when the rate of inflation is going down, yes. I guess what I'm saying is month over month or quarter over quarter, we're continuing to see the rate of inflation decrease.
Yeah, I mean,
Lower than
a
expected
lot
here.
of some of this is ahead of tariffs and the like. I mean, look, we've been settling in at a call it 2.5 to 3% rate based on the various different metrics of core inflation that the Federal Reserve uses, right? I mean, you have sometimes they put in energy, sometimes they take it out. I mean, so
I hear what you're saying. on
so
that,
look,
for sure.
so
I'm just laughing over here.
and look, the idea is
It's going to say whatever they
that-
want it to say. That's the way
Yep.
it's always been engineered.
so,
But Trueflation, they have their own metrics that they use that they can take into account the way the government does it, but they can also measure it a more objective way. Now, I don't think it's the level of shadow stats with the guy with the, I think it's John Lewis, whatever his name is, does it.
John Williams. Yeah.
John Williams, yeah. So it's not shadow stats, but it's at least somewhat they believe is a more realistic interpretation. And I think Trueflation is saying like, hey, like the numbers are still going down even when you
so
take
I
out the
think,
way the
I mean,
government rigs it.
Trueflation, my understanding is it is much more sensitive to overall energy prices and than a lot of these other metrics. And so I think what the government tries to do is tries to extract energy because energy is so cyclical and out of control of monetary policy. Largely it's supply demand driven by OPEC or whatever. So a lot of times energy is just removed, and so core inflation of goods and services, and then non-housing services. So there's a variety of other metrics. Anyway, rates have been coming in, call it between 2.5% and 3%, which is certainly down from where they were in 2021 and 2022 and 2023. But the goal was 2%, and we're making less progress towards achieving that goal. And the Fed has already taken 100 basis points out of the federal funds rate. And so now that we're making less progress, and we're about to stare into prices going up for many goods because of tariffs. This is what is putting the Fed on the sidelines here. And so obviously you have Trump tweeting about the Fed chairman who can't putt straight and who's always late. But
Did he really say he can't putt straight?
He said he can't putt straight. That was in December of 2018, where he said Powell can't putt straight.
Oh, my
and then
goodness.
more recently, he's just been saying he's too late. And he's always been too late. And the reason he's late is because the mandate is 2, not something between 2.5 and 3. And when you have tariffs and you have this uncertainty, and then look, you have the potential. Look, there's a potential here that you get a very sizable tax cut bill that comes out of the budget process, in addition to significant deregulation, and we have another economic boom kind of exiting 2025 into 2026, which will be inflationary again. And so the Fed's thinking, well, if all these other things go as well as the administration wants them to go, we're never going to get back down to 2%. So we don't really need interest rates much lower than where they are right now. I mean, if you take out the, some of the inventory adjustments from the first quarter,
I'm sympathetic to that
GDP's fine. Basically, the employment market is fine.
Well,
4.1.
Not only is it fine, it's overperforming.
Things are good.
Things are actually coming up better than expected.
Why do we need to lower rates when inflation is running above target? And so, look, I mean, now if you want a mortgage, it's 6.5, whatever, 6.5, 7. It's expensive.
That's historically in line though with
for sure. So
I don't historically, I think it's actually closer to like 7.5%.
Yeah.
So if we like X out the
So the problem is that
21st century.
But the problem for Trump is that the Fed's not going to take rates down, which makes it harder to get the budget deficit down because interest payments are.
What is the rate right now?
4.25 to 4.5.
I think they're going to bring it down to like 3.75, 4. I think they'll bring it down. They just won't bring it down as much as people.
So right now,
expect.
There's no expectation for a cut at the next meeting, which is in June, and there's even very limited expectations for a cut in July. The first cut is expected in September.
Interesting.
And maybe another cut by December. The markets are pricing in basically 2 cuts this year.
That sounds about right.
And that's
probably the right.
And so the Fed
play.
The Fed updates their projections every quarter. The last time they did that was in March.
Yeah.
They'll do that again in June. I would expect them to still show. Some guys will show 1 cut this year. Some will show 2. We'll determine. Whatever the median is, it'll be 1 or 2. The market will be up in arms about that decision. But the reprieve on tariffs, this 90-day delay, has pushed out the timing for the first rate cut to start. So in April, right about Liberation Day, because of all the turmoil, markets were saying Fed's cutting in June. And now, because this is gone, now we're pushing out to maybe it's September, maybe it's December. Many Wall Street banks have pushed out to December. So again, this is the type of thing that market participants are obsessed about. But for real Americans who are looking to borrow, borrowing costs are not coming down rapidly, if at all. And so for small businesses looking to roll their debt from COVID, right, a lot of that debt was 5 to 7 year debt. So 2025, 2026, 2027 is heavy maturity season. You're rolling 5 and 7 year paper at from 1%, 2% back then to 5, 6, 7% now.
Wow.
It's way more expensive for small businesses to roll that debt. That's a big refi problem that's staring down, that we're staring down here for more, marginal borrowers. Let's say Apple can borrow or whatever. They, still it's fine for them.
Yeah.
Well, they can just sell shares too.
I think if we get deregulation,
they borrow money, they buy back shares.
I think if we get massive deregulation, and we get tax cuts, and we get the taxes turn into tariffs on other countries, and we get a little bit more manufacturing here. I mean, I think we could thread the needle here. I don't know. I guess I'm here for it. We're going to see how it all plays out. Quick reminder, guys, we are giving away a Bitcoin Las Vegas 2025 ticket courtesy of Bitcoin Ben's Crypto Club. So whoever comments and asks questions, I think we have a live chat as well. I don't know if it's working, but if you comment in the
currently we have another comment, and Jim Wahlberg Jim Wahlberg says that
pull Jim up.
I'm just going to read
What's
it
up,
here.
Jim?
He says that we've been a country longer without the Fed than with it.
That
Why
is
do
true.
we need the Fed?
I agree with you. If we're going to have a it's funny, I was about to say this, is like we're sitting here debating the communist style board, just basically setting the price for money in society. It's just so ridiculous if you really, come down to the principle of it.
I mean,
I completely agree with you, my man, and you couldn't be more correct.
There's a slight educational moment I want to inject here.
Okay,
That's why I was laughing when we were talking about consumer price index. The BLS is responsible for producing this number, but that number is associated with congressionally mandated adjustments in entitlement payments, specifically in like Social Security and other things.
Yeah.
Right. So the BLS and the government is actually encouraged to try to underreport this number always.
Of course. I mean,
as is the government.
Show me the
from a
incentives and I'll show you the
political,
outcome.
Like perspective. So when they calculate this number, including energy, X energy, there's actually much more.
It's a massive,
well,
incentive issue.
It's even better than that. So there's this really cool factor that they put in. It's called the hedonic quality
adjustments. I love those.
adjustment. So what this is, I'll give
This
you an
is
example.
classic.
So what they say is, 10 years ago,
Use your car. Use
you
car.
could
That's
have
the best
like
one.
bought this flat screen TV, and you can buy the same flat screen TV today, and it's doubled in price. So and from like $2,000 to $5,000, but that $5,000 flat screen TV is 3 times as good as the one that you got 10 years ago because it has like higher contrast ratio or like whatever.
Yeah. It has.
But they use this like arbitrary subjective index on quality.
Yeah.
So that when prices actually go up, they could say that they go down.
Yeah.
And maybe TVs are a bad example because that is technically one of like the deflationary
very
goods.
few things that actually goes down.
Yeah.
I was just saying you use cars. Now cars
are going up, but
Yeah.
they're basically saying that
like,
they're going down because the quality of the cars are getting
You
better.
got touch to start now. That's worth $5,000.
That's worth at least
you press
$5,000.
that little
right?
button. You
heated
don't have to turn
seats.
the
You didn't
key.
have heated seats.
Yeah, you
That's
got-
another $3,000 right
You got
there.
a little AC on your butt.
This car
boom.
halved in price,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, man.
Like we
you
got to
know,
adjust that down
yeah.
now, right? So they literally have this completely subjective, arbitrary factor that they can apply to anything in the basket of goods.
Yeah.
Well,
And then they also have the issue of consumer preference.
Mhm.
So they can change consumer preference to adjust the fact that Americans are just becoming more miserly and are choosing inferior substitute goods as part of their basket. So like when inflation goes up and we can't afford beef because it's $15 a pound and we start eating more chicken, they'll say, oh, well, the preference of the consumer has changed to preference chicken over beef.
It's so funny. the games they play. It's so funny.
That's our new makeup of the basket. So this consumer price index is going down because people are only buying chicken.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bond market is increasingly picking up on the fact that that this is bullshit, right? Because if you think about it, right,
Paul wants me to talk about this.
Well, we can get actually we'll get to that.
History is
CPI
the biggest fuck you. It's
CPI is
very satirical.
2.3%, and the 10-year is 4.6%. So people are seeing I need more compensation because the inflation that the government is saying it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the comment about central banks, I was going to say that this man here on the screen, destroyed and ended the central bank back in 1832.
First central bank, right? Yeah.
And look, I mean, it's weird because I do work on Wall Street per se, and I do pontificate about markets, but I've been railing against the Fed for quite some time, and frankly, I will continue to do it. I think they've done a horrific job for a very long time. I think they've helped exacerbate wealth inequality in this country to more than probably any other organization. Just the way that they focus on their interests of the banks, the asset owners, the homeowners, and funding the government over the needs and wants of most of the rest of America, I think is heinous. And
they've got a third
printing
mandate now. Larry Lepard raises this point.
It's
the unofficial mandate is now the market. So now they've got to make sure the market.
It's a financial stability mandate, which really means that we will never let the bond market enact discipline on the government. Right, that is the mandate of the Fed. Do not allow the bond market to put discipline on the government. By that I mean don't let bonds sell off so interest rates move up so much that the U.S. government has a funding problem or a balance of payments problem. Come in and interject earlier with QE or cutting rates or some other facility to make it so banks who are losing money on their bond holdings actually aren't losing money. They could put those bonds back to the Fed at par, which is basically what happened after the SVB issue in 2023. Create a facility and just let them. I mean, it's outrageous, and it protects the banks, it protects the government, and protects anybody who owns assets. And so, look, there's plenty of people in this country who own assets, but there's many more people who don't. And that's the wealth inequality issue. And so, look, I think if we got rid of the central bank and had a market-based, the product that set rates, I think we'd be just fine. But
I agree.
we are where we are, and we're not rapidly moving towards getting rid of the central bank. We can barely even audit the central bank. I mean, that, Ron Paul and Rand Paul have been talking about for
crazy.
forever. We don't even audit. We never audit the Fed, let alone find out where the gold is, all the other,
Fort
all
Knox.
all the other good stuff.
Yeah.
That
When's
that
that
we're
going to
trying
happen?
Yeah. I think Trump and Elon said something about it, but
Yeah,
who
but
knows?
notice how that gets back to the point from earlier.
Yeah.
It's like, yo, we're gonna go audit Fort Knox. It's like, dude, you mentioned that like 2 months ago. You said it was a no-brainer, and here we are. Like, we're waiting. Like, why can't we find where
it's probably because the gold's missing. Like, let's be honest with
Right.
ourselves.
Or
So,
you cut into it and it's tungsten or some other metal, right? Like I think
Well, I think they could fugazi that on us pretty easily. I just
Yeah.
don't think it's there. Maybe they're sitting there leafing up the tungsten right now so they can do it.
Oh man, that's too funny. Hey, Paul, there is one other. I want to remind everybody, guys, we're giving away a Bitcoin 2025 ticket. We're giving away a Bitcoin Day Tampa ticket. So whoever has the best comments will win the tickets, right? If the live chat works, great. Post in there. If that doesn't work for you, just comment in the comment section. Make sure to give us a like and a follow. And Paul, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, we're not quite Qatar. We're not giving away jets quite yet, but you can fly yourself to Vegas and get in for free.
Yeah.
$700 value. Get to see Eric Trump. Get to see Don Jr. Get to see the vice president advocate for Bitcoin. Going to be a great time. And lastly, if you want to close out with
There's one thing I want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet, which I think is significant. I was going to talk about it before, but I wanted to get the inflation talk done.
Okay, sounds good.
Which is this idea that for the past 4 to 8 years, and this is like if you've been in crypto for a long time, like you'll know this. Like everybody and their mother has been trying to be like, we're not a security, we're not a security. But I think now somebody made the question that the past 4 to 8 years is all these projects talking about how they're not a security, but the next 4 to 8 years might be like an argument for why everybody wants to be a security, right? And it really raises questions. I think the new SEC head, Paul Atkins, I mean, blockchains just make sense for, stock assets and securities. I mean, like if you're I foresee a world in the future where all stocks are on blockchains because it's so transparent. You can see it's public information, right? Like you can see the transactions. You can see if funny business is going on, right? Like that just makes sense. That's my personal take. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think they've kind of started that already with companies like BACK, BAKKT. Are you familiar?
I'm familiar with BACK, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already heading in that direction since like 2017. It's just a matter of time.
Well, I mean, a lot of crypto projects are like, I don't want to be a security. We're not this is why we're not a security. So I'm sure Dr. K knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, obviously, I think work-based systems that are protocols that are meant to be largely immutable, obviously, have always been seen as less security-like and more commodity-like.
Yeah, talking to the mic a little more.
Oh, sorry, less security-like and more commodity-like than obviously like proof-of-stake-based systems. I do think that when you talk about being commodities, we're not actually talking about the protocols or the blockchains. Mm-hmm. We're likely talking about hypothecating the stocks on the chains themselves, and you want those to be as natively, issued as possible, meaning directly by the company rather than indirectly by wrapping an issue through a broker.
Yeah.
So, I think that's kind of like the statement. I'll also point out too, and this is maybe a little bit of an aside, but in a proof of work system that is EVM compatible, in the proper construction, you can actually solve MEV, but that solution of MEV is actually a broader statement in how do you originate the fair ordering of transaction execution all the way back to like...
You're blowing people's mind right now. You want to tell
high-speed,
people what MEV even is?
High-frequency trading. So MEV is miner extracted value. It exists when you trade assets on like a DEX or any sort of exchange. Much
but when
like
you're transacting on like a smart contract blockchain.
Yeah. So like if you trade, say like ETH for USDC, there's going to be people that try to front run your transaction and make money off
This
you.
also exists in the regular financial stock exchanges. Like whole companies exist around.
Yeah, this is all high frequency trading, right?
Yeah.
There's been like movies about how people were trying to make fiber lines from Chicago to New York to like arb out like 2 milliseconds in the trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they got front run by people who figured out how to do with microwaves first. But yeah, so there's like a whole industry that's like completely non-value added around high frequency trading. But there's this interesting property of work where if it is like done correctly in a distributed way, it becomes causally invariant, which the mechanism of work being distributed as the mechanism of creating the ordering also solves the problem of how to get rid of high frequency trading. So the sort of economically optimal solution to get rid of high frequency trading, to get rid of MEV, lies in proof of work.
Interesting.
As a slight aside.
Interesting.
So I think not only will you see native issuance of stocks on blockchains, they're going to be the best markets because they trade 24/7, so
Yeah.
you don't have off-market risk.
Exactly.
But you'll also actually have the most efficient execution and ordering engine that doesn't have this extractive HFT component in it. So like proof of work blockchains are technologically and like physics constrained the solution for the ideal trading markets.
I just like the idea of disclosure. Everything's like kind of like on chain. If it's transparent, I think it's powerful for securities to have that.
These projects that now want to become a security, what's the benefit for them? Just like clarity, or
Just like clarity, like clarity of the system, and if we actually get legislation through that kind of like provides the the rules of the game. When you've got centralized third parties, like you want regulation on those centralized third parties, especially if they're custodying customer funds or investments or whatever. Like I think that transparency is good. When we're talking about decentralized money, no, like if you own that money, like it's different, right? Like that's my
Well,
thought on it.
so it's kind of interesting. Like when we talk about like projects versus money, I kind of am in the camp that like protocols should be money, and if
You
it's
think
not,
you think all protocols should be money?
if
I think they can have monetary characteristics. But I don't think My
I-
personal take is that I know plenty of projects that don't necessarily need to be money. They can still
I
have
would
use cases.
I would say in the context of having a permissionless decentralized blockchain that can function as money, you don't need to create isolated tokens and protocols around the monetary characteristic in 99% of cases. There's maybe like a very small subset of cases where like that makes sense. But fundamentally, like what's going to happen in blockchains is that they're going to follow the path of fiat, where there's going to be like 5 or 6 dominant coins or dominant protocols that make up 80% of the value. And like that's like where that trade is going to take place. And there's going to be this like very long tail, but most of that tail is going to go away if it's just like I have a token for the sake of having a token.
Mm-hmm.
So that I have like this native monetary unit in my system, but it's fundamentally not needed if I can have a functional monetary unit that's more broadly accepted over more application spaces, and it will just get replaced out by one of those like top 5 currencies. So like long term, I think it's like a very poor idea to have a blockchain which is meant to have an application specific monetary token. Like the only tokens that will survive are going to be money tokens.
That's interesting.
And applications will
thought.
use those money tokens to operate.
I don't. We're getting down the rabbit hole now. I'm not. I don't even think I'm qualified to even respond to that. But there's some interesting ideas. So I won't push back. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe you're not. I don't know. Maybe we'll have somebody more qualified than myself to contest you on that. But
well, I mean, there's different kinds of tokens, though, right? There's more than just the ERC20. You have your 1155, which do different things.
I think you're getting stuck on Ethereum. He's talking more broadly, like different blockchains and like just.
Yeah, you can have different classes of tokens in a blockchain that like represent assets, but in terms of having tokens which are specifically imbued with a monetary characteristic for one protocol with a specific purpose, I think there's very, very few applications that necessitate having an independent token. Ergo, in a world where you have scalable functional blockchains that function as money, those will end up being the settlement tokens in any other application.
Okay.
Interesting.
So we'll end up with just a few monetary tokens that are should have value.
Yeah, I mean,
we're going to
it's
see how it all plays
it's
out.
the same idea. Like you go through the fiat currency,
Right.
We have this long tail of fiat currencies, but everybody uses, the dollar, the yen, the euro,
The pound, the Swiss
pound.
franc. I
And
mean,
this-
more
yeah,
than
like-
5, I would say. But we're gonna see how it all plays out, right? Like I'm excited for the future. I I think that the future is bright if we can thread the needle here and fight for the values we believe in, privacy, decentralization, etc. Right?
Speaking
Store
of that,
value.
here's an interesting post we can probably close on if you guys.
Yeah, sure. Let's close on this.
So, Brian Armstrong just highlighted this idea here put forth by Pirate Wires.
So this is from Palmer Luckey, who's the founder of Endural, which is a defense company. He says, the United States should immediately expand our base on Guantanamo Bay into Liberty City, an American Singapore of the Caribbean. We already control Guantanamo under a perpetual lease, complete with a deepwater port, airfields, and proximity to key trade routes. Why not turn it into a special economic zone? Imagine a gilded megafortress broadcasting capitalism's bounty on the coast of a failing communist state. Shipbuilding, energy refining, near equator, space launches, luxury tourism. Any Cuban who makes it there by foot, boat, or bike gets asylum and a work permit. Like West Berlin to the Soviets, Liberty City would be both a boomtown and a weapon, a tropical brain drain machine that accelerates regime collapse in Havana. The treaty limits commercial enterprise to direct support of naval or coaling operations. But who's enforcing it? Cuba already disavows the lease. Let them shake their fists up at a wall of battlefield-grade sentry towers beneath a sky full of starships. That's an interesting take. Go up a little bit. Brian Armstrong says, we need more special economic zones in the U.S. We should designate approximately 10 or so like this across different pieces of federal land, each with its own exemption from federal and state law. One for bio, one for drones and aviation, one for crypto, one for robotics, one for mining, etc.
Might as well
See
throw
what
in
happens.
nuclear energy.
Yeah, nuclear fusion. Well, see what happens without so much regulation within a small sandbox. Copy what works outside. I think this is a brilliant idea. And honestly, this is what China did with their special economic zones. And it gave them Shenzhen and it gave them the lead in so many different. They essentially copied the Hong Kong model in a lot of ways. And, I absolutely think we should do this. I think it's a brilliant idea. Let's unpack. What do you think, Craig? Give everybody's closing statements here.
No, I mean, without the first time I'm hearing it, but I mean, it seems, very, very compelling. I mean, clearly, throughout history, when we've had small geographic regions where highly intelligent people are incentivized to work together and create strong economic outcomes, they're incentivized to do so with preferential tax and regulatory treatment, like good things happen. And we need some good things to happen in America. And if we could, do that in whatever. Start with one. How about we start with one, right? I think this is, sometimes like I feel like you get these, let's have 10, let's go crazy. And then we wind up spending too much time trying to plan 10 and then we wind up getting nothing. Let's focus on one first. And then maybe, I don't know, pick one of those, pharmaceuticals is probably a pretty good place to start. I mean, we need to make medicine here. Let's do that one first and make it in a place that's, by the port or whatever it is and focus on one and have some smart people put it together and then do the next one after that, right? So let's start small, but let's get moving, right? I think that's one of the things that I think I liked about, and I still like about Trump is like, we need to get moving, right? I think there's certainly been inertia in this country and it existed, COVID did that to us, but I think Biden, allowed that to perpetuate. The country just kind of got fat and lazy. I mean, with the money printing and the deficits and just, stock market's up. So everything is good. And, 401ks are good. And it's just
mint chocolate chip ice cream.
Just, like, and there's
like no ice cream cone.
Right. And before
falling off his bike, falling down the stairs,
and before,
falling on the stage.
Right. Before you know it, I don't know, you probably could get Grok to pull up how many, electric cars were made in China in 2018 versus 2025.
Oh my
right?
God, it's probably like just.
But the numbers have gone from
20x.
basically zero to they're the biggest car exporter in the world, and it happened in fucking 6 years, right? Like so, I mean,
1 million battery electric vehicles in 2025. Let's see here.
It's funny. So I actually worked in.
So it went from 1 million to 10 million in 7 years.
Yeah,
right?
it's 10x.
So like 10x, like that could have happened here. That wasn't that 2018 wasn't like that far ago, and so we have this like inertia here, and Trump's trying to kind of end that shit, and so I kind of want to keep that momentum going, where like we're moving. We're breaking things. We're moving fast. It's okay to make mistakes. Let's not get scared. Let's just kind of keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And he has the mandate. Like, fucking do it. Like, let's go for it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I agree. What do you got?
Well, there's a couple of interesting points here. I will say Elon like broke all projection curves on battery electric vehicles.
Oh my God.
Like in 2012, right before I did my doctorate, I was working in like hybrid electric battery vehicle type things, and the projections on these numbers was that it would make like 1% of the vehicle market by like this time. And I don't have great numbers, but I think the worldwide production is like something like 60 million.
So the government took $8 billion and barely made 37 EV charging stations in like 10 years or whatever.
Well, but because of Elon,
And Elon,
because
like,
of, like
literally
the
made-
Chinese, I mean,
Yeah.
like it's 25% or something of like the global automotive market, which like massively exceeds like any projections from like 10 years ago, like
Yeah.
by
Wow.
like a factor of 10.
Wild.
Right. So, kudos to Elon for like pushing the vanguard on that. In terms of the special economic zones, like Puerto Rico is an interesting place because of the tax treatments. It actually is technically a special economic zone in some ways for both pharmaceuticals and crypto.
Yeah.
So like sort of like all of the like expats down there are in one of those two industries predominantly.
Interesting.
And I think, Puerto Rico is like an extreme example. So like it takes a lot to move down there. So you definitely don't get as much innovation as you could get if you certainly made it in a more favorable place. So if you said like Austin, for example, was a special economic zone, like that would be wild. Because people would flock to Austin if you had like the right set of incentives, and you could get very, very interesting outcomes, especially in a state like Texas, which is already largely well regulated and deregulated in a lot of ways.
I mean, in a way, we need like this, like some of this. I'm not going to say it's like state capitalism, but it is a little bit of like state planning to some degree with private market, forces, right? We need.
I think it's
the
less state
government to
planning than more of like providing incentives and letting the free market do its thing.
But it's state planning in like these are the areas we really need to focus on because this is where we're not only are deficient, but these are the technologies of the future, and let's get the private sector to be focusing their resources in
I think
these
that's accurate.
specific areas. Not within the private market, it spends too much time like high frequency trading and doing fucking non-productive things that has created paper wealth. For lots of people.
But that's
and
like
wasted a lot of fucking money.
Yeah,
that's a fiat thing. I mean, that's a product of the fiat system. I mean, it's hollowed out our engineers. I mean, the average person, you're in college, like, they want to go to fucking Wall Street and go to finance and fucking shuffle paper around and, make derivatives on bullshit and blow up the whole system and get bailed out by fucking taxpayer money, like socialize. Like, this is crony capitalism. It's like,
we need to change
instead of like incentivizing them to go in high robotics fields and build robots of the future and have manufacturing and like, I want to be an engineer.
I am. This is like a tricky thing, right? So like I'm all about incentivizing things. The problem is like it gets so political so fast, right? And if like we go back in time, there was like a ton of just money that was absolutely burned to the ground on obviously like dumb ideas. After 2008, with all of those injected, funds.
Of course, no doubt about it. I think it's less.
I mean, Elon technically benefited, so that was like a huge win, right?
Yeah.
He was that's like an interesting story. I don't know if you guys know, but like he was down to his like last $3 million, and he was like wiring this over to Tesla to like cover payroll, right?
Yeah.
And then they got that $500 million like DOE grant / loan like the next week, but like he was like on the precipice of just basically losing everything. So that was like a positive one, but on the negative side, they like funded Cylindra, which is like cylindrical solar panels. And if like you just can do geometry and ray tracing, you'd be like, this is a really dumb idea, guys. Like what are we doing here? Right.
I mean, I think if we use like the creation of the sovereign wealth fund in conjunction, with this, where you had like some smart people who were like, Cylindra, not high risk, not such a great idea. But these are some better areas, and the government's going to take an equity piece, and so there's benefit back to the.
That's what Chamath is saying on the all-in pod.
Taxpayer. If we do things
why don't we get a little equity piece
This
here?
would be an interesting idea because like I've also been on the grant side of things, like with the government, and like grants kind of suck in a lot of ways. There's like a ton of administrative overhead, and there's like a ton of requirements, and they're designed to sort of be good in terms of like they want some degree of like accountability with government money. but it is very inefficient in terms of the process of getting them and then like operating them. So having government money go out in a private equity like way, if you're able to sort of have a degree of insurance on return or KPIs or something like you would with like a fund manager, that would be a much better balance than the current grants process as it exists.
Right.
And that might be like a good way to sort of spur these incentives, but and it might be easier to create KPIs there, like as like a sovereign wealth fund would be much easier to create KPIs on actually.
But but in some way, in a lot of ways, right? I mean, we need to transition to, unfortunately, it's like we need to be in a wartime economy. Like we're behind. Like we're losing.
We're sure as hell doing wartime spending right now. While we're not in war.
So we need some. The capitalism that we've created here has created wealth inequality, has created inefficient use of resources, has created a lot of finance guys who've made a lot of money, and it hasn't really done what it should have done for society, for America, and it's created this populist, president who's trying to shift the pendulum back. And but we're going to need some state. And everyone said, well, once you get the state involved, then it's going to fuck the whole thing up. But I'd argue the state, it's kind of fucked up right now. So in a lot of ways, so. If we could somehow, private public partnerships where we have a smart sovereign wealth fund council, working with the government to create special economic zones where, the right industries were being promoted, then we can accelerate this transition from where we are now to where we need to get. And it doesn't need to take 25 years. It could take.
I think sandboxes, special economic zones, and tax incentives are the recipe for success, because it doesn't cost the taxpayer any. Like, it doesn't cost like, hey, come here and do this. It encourages immigration in an area and build, and basically like, look, we'll stay out of your way. Like, it doesn't cost me as a taxpayer anything to do that. It's an incentive. Instead, I might benefit, right? I might have a better job, and we might have more revenue, sales tax or whatever in the region, right? Like all these things. So I think that's probably the thing. Looks like we got some breaking news here. It looks like Iran is ready to sign a deal with conditions. NBC citing official. So that's Zero Hedge here reporting. Wow. So a comment says, if Trump inks a good deal with Iran, can we all agree he's the greatest president in American history? I think history has a long way to go. We're not sure on that one yet, but I think a peace deal with Iran if he can really get this situation in the Middle East, which has been perpetual war, misery, and human suffering for such a long time, if he can actually thread the needle there, I mean, that he may very well be the best president of all time. So I don't know, the Abraham Accords, if they can continue to be extended, and he's got this, like, a lot of stuff's churning over there. He's shown that he's willing to, a lot of people are like, oh, he's a puppet of Netanyahu. I saw all these memes and he's like on Netanyahu's lap or whatever. Netanyahu. And then now all of a sudden it's like, he's like, oh, fuck you, Netanyahu. And now he's negotiating with everybody. So like, you can't really box him into a fucking box. I mean, he's not going to follow your orthodox thinking of what you think he might do. I think that Netanyahu, he's willing to blow it all up.
I think the Netanyahu comments pissed him off.
You think that got to him, pissed him off?
I think it did.
So he's like, fuck this, I'm not on Netanyahu's lap.
I think he doesn't like anybody saying that anybody controls him. And so when people started to say that he was a puppet for Netanyahu, what did he do? He fired Mike Walls, right? Like he's like, no, I'm not actually.
Well, I personally believe he actively sabotaged what was happening.
No, I think
I think Mike Walls actually.
No, I agree.
If it wasn't Michael Walls, it was actually that his chief guy, that Alex Wong guy, whoever it was, put that fucking journalist in the chat. So like, I really truly believe that there was something going on there that, like, they broke ranks and they tried to like set him up in his fucking dirty politics. And I think that's what the Alex Wong guy honestly did. He can hide behind possible. I accidentally added a very critical journalist to the chat, but like, I don't think anybody's buying that. This was a fucking setup, and like, this was planned. I think that. I mean, I think that the evidence reflects that.
That kind of makes sense, and the media definitely like played fiddle to that like
absolutely.
very well.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to mention with like this whole military-industrial complex is, geographically speaking, we should have the smallest military of like anybody on the planet.
Right, because
we've never had like a foreign adversary like come and attack us
I
since
know.
we've been a country.
Yeah.
Right? We went through a First World War and a Second World War, and we've never fought on American soil, save for like one of the Aleutian Islands, like one time.
Yeah.
Right? So like as a national security matter, we are geographically in the best position to have the smallest footprint, and the only thing we technically need to do is like secure the southern border.
You're right. I mean, it's like part of the.
What are we even talking about?
Yeah,
It's
it's
crazy.
like I agree with you, man. I agree with you. Like all this money being spent on all these bases all over the world, like this is like it's just draining from the future of our citizenry, and like it's enough is enough. Like I like I've said multiple times, like you want our military there, like you actually want us to be there to protect you. You should pay for that. You want to pay for all the jobs and soldiers or whatever. And like, I think like a business deal, we should make money from it. Like, we shouldn't be spending our money to do all this stuff, right? Kind of like what Trump did with South Korea. It was like, hey, like, listen, like we've got this base here, but like you want all our soldiers, all our stuff here. You want it to stay here. Like you kind of pay the bill here. Like this is not, Main Street isn't going to continue to pay for this.
Well, so there's like another thing here too, and maybe this like actually ties back into sort of special economic zones. If you look at the spending on the military, it's half the discretionary budget.
That's crazy,
right? Which is crazy. But then like let's take a look at Elon and like what he's done with SpaceX, right? If you look at what he's done with SpaceX, he's doing things. And he's developing better technologies for like 1/100th.
He talks about it. Did you read
of
his,
what
did you read
the
his biography?
traditional,
by Walter? I think it was Walter Isaacson who wrote his biography recently.
Yeah, but like if you look at Boeing and you look at
NASA, and it's like the system though is corrupt. I mean, like the way that like they're charging the U.S. taxpayers like $80,000 for a fucking screw.
But
he comes in and says
that's,
like
that's the point. Like if we get down to like the real meat of the thing. There's some hybrid synergy here where you could actually create special economic zones to replace all of the entrenched military contractors,
of course,
to run them like startups.
Yeah.
And you could have 100x savings or at least 10x savings, which would take half your discretionary budget.
It's
down to like a much more reasonable 5%.
When you read Elon's book, he talks about the broken incentive structure of like this cost plus percentage where like, every bill is now like the incentive for the company is to bill 20% more and take longer to do it. I mean, it's such a broken incentive structure. And he's looking at this stuff and he's making the rocket. He's like, they're like, oh, only the government can make the rocket. And he like looks at the thing. He's like, they're paying $80,000 for a screw here. They're paying, $5 million for a fucking part that they can make for $50 off of eBay parts. It's like, it's crazy. It's fucking insane. And the incentive is for them to just every year when they build a government, keep raising it because there's no, who are they hurting? It's just the government. It's just, but really it's hurting the average people. And,
well, no, I mean, it's hurting society. It's hurting productivity. It's hurting like aggregate, wealth and prosperity. Like it's bad.
And that's what happens when you have a high demand for something, low supply, and then a person in the middle that's selling that and tacking on like a super high fee to sell that $50,000 bolt when it really costs $20.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole design.
And I think that's where blockchain can, to kind of go back to the question that was asked about how blockchain can innovate. Having some material or product like this on a blockchain that you can just tap right into, something that's not around yet. But I think hopefully we can see it in the future.
It's a whole parasitic incentive structure because these like Boeing and like these companies, like I think it's Boeing and NASA and a couple, even the Space Center. Like when they've got Boeing specifically, that was the example that Musk gave in the book. But the people that build the parts and sell to Boeing has no, like Boeing's not going back and being like, hey, like, this screw costs fucking 1 cent. Why the fuck are you charging me $80,000? Because Boeing can go turn back around and go to the government and say, hey, this is our cost. And guess what? We get 20% of whatever the total bill is. So it's just an incentive structure that's completely broken. And then the costs just escalate. And then Boeing has no reason to go back to the manufacturer and be like, hey, why are you charging me $80,000 for a screw?
There's something else here that's like interesting when you think about this. So like when you think about the best companies, so like companies like have like an arc. They have like a lifetime, right? And like a company comes up and like a company goes away, like IBM, right? But that's because there was like a small group of founders who like built a company and like ran a company. And then like once those people step away, like you kind of like have a decay of management and leadership over like cycles of leadership, and it just perpetually gets worse. Like if you have like a cash cow, there's no economic like pressure on the business to really like keep efficient and innovate. So you just like take that in, you become more bureaucratic, you become less innovative, you become less efficient. And so in some ways, because the government is like paying these companies that have been military contractors for 70 years, the only reason they even exist where like your IBM and Dells like go under is because the government has this ridiculous structure with no accountability.
Yeah, exactly.
But the way that you fundamentally fix it is you put it back to a startup mentality that's founder and profit led.
Yeah.
Like that is like how you fix the system. Like fundamentally. So there's some like synergy here where like you take a SpaceX like model where you do multiple bids, you give a couple of the bids to like startups effectively.
Yeah.
And you see if they can make it. And when they make it, like they'll suddenly lower the cost to buy 10x for like a fighter jet, like is costing $150 million.
That's insane.
I'm pretty sure that there's people that could make this for a lot less than $150 million a copy.
And I think it's that cost plus percent. That's the whole thing.
I think if you married that also with a proper cost of capital, you would have the holy grail, right? We've kept these businesses around, these dying businesses around by having cost of capital be too low.
They're able to survive on 1%. They did the whole thing.
Zombie capitalism, baby. Yeah. It's
cronyism. It's complete
nobody
cronyism.
ever goes out of business. No one ever goes bankrupt because if
We're too big
IBM
to
went
fail.
away, 20,000 people would lose their
Yeah,
jobs.
too big to fail.
And so they just, and it's not
what would really happen is, somebody would come in and buy out that failing company from bankruptcy or whatever, and they would rehire those people, and those people would be reallocated to more efficient positions, and
productivity would grow.
Actual real capitalism would be created, and you'd have this beautiful thing where you've got this jungle, and like some plants die in the jungle, and they need to die and decay, and new plants will rise up from that.
But there's also just like cycles of businesses, and there's cycles of industry. I think like Intel is a great example of this right now. Like Intel's going bankrupt, guys. Like it hasn't like done it yet, but like it's on the fast track to bankruptcy, right? And they're trying to like separate out their foundry business from their design business. They've been having like issues keeping up with TMSC in terms of like decreasing the node size and adopting extreme UV, lithography techniques.
Yeah.
But like that's part of the process of like the business cycle. So there's both like an issue with Intel from a leadership perspective, but there's also just a change in the maturity of the technology. Like that is going to eventually become a competitive commodity business. Like foundries will all end up at 2 nanometers, not go past 2 nanometers, and like they'll all just produce at 2 nanometers.
Creative destruction works, right?
Yeah.
I mean, China actually operates in more of a creative destruction mentality than the U.S. does.
Really?
Factories and companies in China beat the shit out of each other consistently to generate basically no profit.
Yeah.
In order to keep producing more, become more efficient and even better. So there's because it's not a shareholder mentality based society, right? They don't really care as much about their equity market. It's not it's they based, and so that's why.
Well, the government sure as hell does. They like stop reporting statistics and they print money.
They don't care about but they don't care about their equity market. Is my point. Where we only care about our equity market. Our stock market here is the
heartbeat.
It's everything. And so, but China is way more efficient, way more productive because they're not operating for shareholder return. They're operating, these companies are just beating each other up constantly to lower costs, to become more productive, to create more. I'm not saying we're ever going to move, overnight to that structure, but creative destruction, would do some good. And
but I guess my point too is like, if you look at Intel, because it's a private company, it's following this arc, but that arc is natural. So like to your point, like it should change. It should die in some level and it should become a different commodity business because like that's the evolution of the industry. But once you put that under a government contract, it never happens.
Die, right? Yeah. Right. And the best engineers never feel like they have to leave because they're tied in, their compensation's tied into the share price, and they're making tons of money, and so they don't
can do nothing.
There's no incentive to leave that entity, and so the best people don't really necessarily have to leave.
Yeah,
now, the young people leave, right? Because they don't see a future and they go and do other things. But we need all those people to leave and go start new things, right?
One of the best quotes ever is like, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And it's just like the more I go through life and the older I get, like you just see it everywhere. And it's like so true. It's so fucking true. No matter what it is, whether it's business, government, etc., people, it's just, it holds true. I think this is a good stopping point, guys. I just want to remind everybody we've got a 2 tickets we're giving away. So a $700, I think roughly $700 Bitcoin Las Vegas 2025 ticket to the conference there at the end of the month. And we're also giving away a Bitcoin Day Tampa ticket. Bitcoin Day is just kind of like a one-day event, really cool event, small, more intimate event where you can meet speakers and talk to people and have lunch and brunch served and breakfast and lunch served to you with coffee and everything. So highly recommend both these events. They're both great conferences. And we have a couple questions, so we're going to be giving those tickets away. But if anybody has any, Paul, you want to check on that and see if we have any more questions or any comments that we can comment on before we make a final determination there. And then after that, we will wrap up this stream. We talked about a lot of interesting stuff today, guys. A lot of interesting rabbit holes. Anybody have any closing thoughts before we answer any final questions? What do you got, Craig?
End the Fed.
End the Fed.
I like that comment. If we don't have any other comments, my vote would be for the end the Fed guy.
End the Fed guy. All right, so that's your vote. Which ticket should he get? Should he get the Bitcoin Day Tampa or should he get the Bitcoin Day Conference ticket? The Bitcoin Las Vegas ticket. So yeah, at the next Bitcoin Day Tampa event, we got Gary Cardone, BJ Dichter, my friend BJ, my friend Charlie, my friend CJ. Lots of great people speaking here. So lots of fantastic speakers. Nick, who comes on our pod all the time here. Mark Hinley, who's been on I don't know if he's been on Runway, but he's been on Cypherpunk'd. Just tons of good speakers at Bitcoin Day Tampa. Paul, you even got Paul down there. Paul, you going to be MC in this one, Paul?
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
Only
All
if
right.
Craig Shapiro is going to be there.
All right.
I was going to be there, but I'm going to be
Wow.
I'm going to be traveling, so I will not
Wow,
unfortunately be able to attend.
You guys have actually given me an idea. I think we have 4 extra tickets to Bitcoin Las Vegas.
So if you want to give them to the Runway pod, we will say they are from Quai Network and we'll give them away. So
yeah, we should probably do something with them, right?
We definitely should. Also, speaking of Quai, Dr. K here is the CTO and a co-founder of Quai Network. And I think I posted on my story. He has these cool like little cash receipts, and you get 20 Quai from it. So, but
also the background on my Twitter right there.
Is that the blockchain visualized?
Yes,
That's pretty cool.
that is a sharded hierarchy of merged by chains.
It kind of looks like Kadina's chain weaver in some kind of way, but this one looks more like a caterpillar or something.
Think of it like it's like a fractal of a pearl necklace, so to speak.
A fractal of a pearl necklace.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. But Paul, can you pull up my tweet where I showed a bunch of go down where I retweeted? I think go down a little bit more. There it is. So if you scan this, so basically I put it in one of our GPU mining rigs and I showed you made this kind of like 20 Quai bill, and if you scan the QR code that's on there, with this app that you download, which is called BlipPay, I think, press show more on the quote. Show more. So if you download BlipPay and you scan that private key, you'll get 20 Quai, and then you send it to another wallet. Because anybody that scans it can take the 20 Quai. So your Quai is not protected if you just scan it on BlipPay. You have to make another Quai wallet and send it to it. But it's kind of cool. So you can see how quickly the network processes transactions. Interesting showcase of blockchain technology.
I will just say something here.
Yeah, say something.
So we have a couple like applications that have got me pretty excited. So fundamentally with Quai, right? It's how do you build P2P electronic cash? Like it's the underlying, and you want to have the decentralization through proof of work mining and like truly decentralized number of nodes distributed around the globe, but you also want to have properties that let it at least function like a Visa MasterCard replacement, meaning settlement guarantees in under 8 seconds. And there are some applications that also like maybe kind of want to have a Web 2 feel where it's even less than that. You want to get like a 1 or 2 second sort of response time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 applications that kind of are showcasing this. One is called Kipper Money, which is this tipping app within Twitter. It's like an overlay, basically. You just download this extension, and then if you just like it like gives people 1 Quai, and then if you like tip, you can tip them like an arbitrary amount of Quai. But it allows you to like tip creators or
Is
people
this
that you
similar
like.
to how was it Nostr? You can send Lightning, you can send Sats.
Yeah, it's a similar idea to that, except it's on top of X.
Okay.
So instead of like
X, yeah.
having to like defect and create your own social network that only
Yeah.
has like one gated community, the idea with Kipper is they're actually going to build it against all of the social networks. So
Okay,
it
so
becomes a
just-
global overlay of a
It's just
monetary
an
network.
overlay. Okay. Interesting.
Right.
Very cool.
But the cool part about that is like you go through and you start like clicking, and because this is such a fast blockchain, it feels like a Web 2 experience, even though you're using Web 3 because it's settling at the rate that like you're interacting with it, which is pretty cool. And then there's one other application that is launching. It's a meme coin thing. So I'm not like a huge meme coin guy, but like there's degens that like meme coins. It's called poop.fun because at least, Quai recognizes what meme coins are.
POOP.
Yeah.
Jeff's taking notes over here. My name is Jeff.
But they're launching this cool feature where they when you make a token, you actually have to compete it like battle royale up a bracket to bond out. So then like you sort of like get on the bracket schedule, and then there's like a time where like the tokens fight based off aggregate market cap, and there's like
God.
a decay and like penalties to sell and things. But basically like the loser's token gets like killed and their liquidity goes to the winner's token. So you get like this exponential like buildup of like market cap to like bond out.
Oh my gosh.
So it's interesting in that if you're like, you care about meme coins, like you have this issue of sniping, you have this issue of distribution, you have this issue of just like signal to noise and like identifying coins. So it actually is like a good mechanistic design to create like a fairer launch of meme coins. But it's also fun because like when you interact with it, there's actually like this process that we have in the system, which is pretty cool, where not only do we have really fast like settlement times, but there's actually like even faster pending. So the application is using this like pending property, which allows it to act almost instantaneously. So like when you click on poop.fun, it actually feels like you're interacting with Solana, which is like this highly centralized, like bullshit decentralized system. But because we're using like the prediction of the next block and not waiting for the next block, it's right like 99.9% of the time in its pending state. But when you interact with it, it feels like Web 2.
Yeah.
So I'm just excited because it's like the first time that I've seen a truly decentralized system, like based off proof of work, act like Web 2 from the user's perspective. So anyway, two cool things to check out. Kipper Money if you're a creator or you like to tip creators, and then poop.fun if you're into that degenerate meme coin thing. Anyway, fun times.
All right.
Give them a follow. Stay tuned. We've got Craig Shapiro in the building, always giving us hot takes on what's going on macroeconomically. Check it out. Stay tuned. You'll become better for it. And then we've got Jeff Chirino. Jeff, it's a me, Jeff. And he also is actively engaged in Web3. So give him a follow. And he is our loyal home team, regular. So expect to see him back soon. That being said, guys, one last reminder. We're giving away tickets to Bitcoin 2025. It is going to be a packed house, insane event. We've got Ross Ulbricht free, and that is yet another promise kept. Awesome stuff. And we've got Bitcoin Day Tampa coming up, where we've got Gary Cardone. We were going to have Byron Donalds. Unfortunately, he had to cancel due to family private matters, but we still have a stacked deck here as well. So make sure to engage, and you'll get a ticket to come see all these awesome people live. If there's anything else you wanted to say before we close out, now's your chance, guys. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. And we're going to give away 2 tickets, so we got 2 winners so far. If we don't have any other questions, Paul, and appreciate you guys all coming on, and you get a diversity of different viewpoints, whether it be on macro topics, current events, politics, Web3, whatever. So thank you for coming on today.
Appreciate it, guys.
Is it safe to say don't forget to poop and bond out?
Yeah, there you go. Well, no, I'll put it this way. First,
I think you guys are full of shit.
there was fart coin, then there was butthole. So the inevitable sequel is poop.
I think you guys are full of shit. What do you got, Craig?
Yeah, full of gas. All good.
All right, guys. Well, that's a
So
wrap.
let's end on a bit of a less shitty note.
I can't
Here-
take this shit anymore.
Here's a
Being gay
a
tax.
wholesome meme.
What is more gay? Question mark. Being gay, 0%. Taxes, 100%. So that's a pretty good pull.
There we go. And then here it says, so a gay IRS agent is like super gay.
Oh my
There
God.
you go. Way
All
to
right.
end on.
All right, guys. That's a wrap.
The runway.